Have you ever stood before an ancient monument or read about a historical event that left you with more questions than answers? For centuries, countless enigmas from our past have remained stubbornly sealed, their secrets guarded by time itself. From the purpose of mysterious structures to the fate of vanished civilizations, these puzzles have captivated historians, archaeologists, and curious minds across generations. They represent the tantalizing gaps in our understanding of human history, the unanswered whispers of our ancestors that echo through time. What if I told you that we are now standing at the threshold of a new era, where the very tools that define our modern world might finally unlock these age-old mysteries? We are living through a technological revolution that is reshaping every aspect of our lives, and history is no exception. Cutting-edge innovations like DNA analysis, LiDAR scanning, and artificial intelligence are not just changing our future, they are offering us a powerful lens through which to re-examine our past. Imagine being able to peer through dense jungle canopies to reveal lost cities, or extract genetic material from artifacts thousands of years old to trace forgotten migrations. These aren't scenes from science fiction anymore. They are the real tools now at our disposal, capable of probing depths that were once utterly inaccessible. In this video, we will embark on an extraordinary journey through 30 of history's most perplexing mysteries, each one a story waiting for its final chapter to be written. From the construction of the pyramids to the disappearance of famous explorers, from undeciphered ancient scripts to hidden tombs, we will explore how modern technology is providing new clues and fresh perspectives. This isn't just about solving puzzles, it's about reconnecting with our shared human story in ways we never thought possible. So join me as we dive into these fascinating cases where the past meets the future, and where the secrets that have eluded us for generations might finally be within our grasp. Our journey into the past begins with a story of hope, hardship, and a haunting disappearance that has echoed through the centuries. In 1587, a group of over 100 English settlers, including men, women, and children, established a colony on Roanoke Island, off the coast of what is now North Carolina. Their governor, John White, sailed back to England for desperately needed supplies, but his return was delayed for 3 years by war. When he finally made it back to Roanoke in 1590, the settlement was utterly deserted. There were no signs of a struggle, no mass graves, just an eerie silence. The only clue left behind was the word Croatoan, carved into a wooden post, and the letters Crow etched into a tree. This single word has fueled speculation and debate for over 400 years, transforming the lost colony from a historical event into an enduring American legend. Theories about their fate are as varied as they are compelling. Some believe the colonists, facing starvation and hostile relations with some local tribes, attempted to sail back to England and were lost at sea. Others suggest they were wiped out by a disease or attack from a neighboring Powhatan tribe. The most persistent theory, hinted at by the Croatoan carving, is that the settlers assimilated with the friendly Croatoan people who lived on what is now Hatteras Island and were absorbed into the community. Without concrete evidence, however, these ideas remained in the realm of historical conjecture. For generations, the mystery seemed destined to remain unsolved, a ghost story from the earliest days of European settlement in the New World. This is where our modern technological toolkit comes into play, offering methods of investigation that earlier researchers could only dream of. One of the most promising tools is ground-penetrating radar, or GPR. This technology allows archaeologists to see beneath the soil without ever putting a shovel in the ground. It can identify disturbances in the earth like buried foundations, storage pits, and crucially unmarked graves. By systematically scanning the area around the known fort site and potential expansion areas, researchers could locate evidence of where the colonists lived and perhaps where some may have been buried, providing critical clues about their final days. Furthermore, advanced soil analysis can now detect chemical signatures left by human activity centuries ago. The presence of certain elements and compounds can indicate past habitation sites, latrines, or areas where metalworking took place, painting a detailed picture of daily life and potentially its sudden end. But perhaps the most powerful tool lies in the realm of genetics. Researchers can now conduct DNA testing on present-day descendants of the local Native American tribes, including those who identify as descendants of the Croatoan. By comparing their genetic profiles with DNA extracted from historical remains in England that are linked to the lost colonists, scientists could find an undeniable genetic link, finally proving the assimilation theory and closing the book on America's oldest missing persons case. From the vanished settlers of the New World, we now turn to a shadowy figure lurking in the foggy alleyways of the old. If the Roanoke mystery is defined by absence, our next case is defined by a presence so brutal and terrifying it has become the stuff of global legend. In the autumn of 1888, the impoverished Whitechapel district of London was gripped by a series of murders so savage they changed the course of criminal investigation forever. Over a few short months, 5 women, Mary Ann Nichols, Annie Chapman, Elizabeth Stride, Catherine Eddowes, and Mary Jane Kelly, were brutally killed by an individual the press would chillingly dub Jack the Ripper. The killer's skill with a knife suggested some anatomical knowledge, and the taunting letters sent to police and newspapers, some claiming responsibility, poured gasoline on the public's fear. Despite one of the largest manhunts of the era, the perpetrator was never caught, his identity vanishing into the same London smog from which he emerged. The list of suspects is a who's who of Victorian eccentricity and infamy, each theory more compelling than the last. Was it the disturbed barber Aaron Kosminski, who was placed at the scene by a witness and later committed to an asylum? Could it have been the respected artist Walter Sickert, whose paintings some find disturbingly thematic? Perhaps it was a member of the royal family, involved in a cover-up to silence a scandal, as some conspiracy theories suggest. For over a century, historians and amateur sleuths have pored over fragmented police reports, census records, and personal diaries, constructing and deconstructing cases against dozens of men. Yet, without physical proof, the identity of Jack the Ripper has remained the ultimate cold case, an enigma wrapped in a mystery. This is precisely where 21st century science enters the picture, armed with techniques that would seem like pure magic to the Victorian detectives on the case. The most promising evidence comes from a handful of surviving artifacts, the letters. Several of the infamous Ripper letters, including the one that first used the name Jack the Ripper, are stored in archives, and on their aged paper and faint ink could lie the killer's genetic fingerprint. Modern forensic techniques can now use a non-destructive process to extract minuscule DNA samples from the gum on envelopes or from the skin cells and saliva inevitably left behind when licking a stamp or sealing a letter. This mitochondrial DNA passed down through the maternal line could be the key. Once a viable DNA profile is obtained, the real detective work begins in the digital realm. Investigative genetic genealogy, the same method used to identify the Golden State Killer, could then be deployed. By uploading the anonymous DNA profile to public genealogical databases, researchers could potentially find distant living relatives of the letter writer. By building out a sprawling family tree from these genetic matches and cross-referencing it with historical records like census data, ship manifests, and birth certificates, they could narrow the list of suspects down to a single, identifiable individual. This process wouldn't just be about finding a name, it would be about confirming the authenticity of the letters themselves, proving whether they were a cruel hoax or a genuine confession. Beyond the letters, science can also tell us more about the victims themselves, offering a form of posthumous justice and reclaiming their stories from the sensationalism that has surrounded them. Isotopic analysis of their teeth and bones can provide a biography written in chemistry. the specific variants of elements like strontium and oxygen locked in their tooth enamel act as a geological fingerprint, revealing where they grew up and even tracking their movements throughout their lives. This data can help verify their often muddled histories and give us a clearer, more respectful understanding of who these women really were, beyond being just the Ripper's prey. While the shadow of Jack the Ripper may never fully lift from Whitaker, modern technology offers our best chance yet to finally shine a light on the man hiding within it. Leaving the fog-shrouded streets of Victorian London behind, we now journey to the vast, wind-swept steppes of Central Asia, home to one of history's most powerful and secretive burials. The death of Genghis Khan in 1227 marked the end of an era defined by unprecedented conquest, but it was the aftermath of his passing that spawned a mystery for the ages. According to legend, the funeral procession carrying his body to its final resting place was a grimly efficient operation. To ensure the tomb's location would never be discovered and desecrated, his loyal soldiers are said to have killed every person they encountered along the route. Once the great Khan was interred, the slaves who built the tomb were executed by the soldiers, and then the soldiers themselves were killed by another unit, creating a chain of silence that has remained unbroken for nearly 8 centuries. The very earth itself was reportedly rearranged. Rivers were diverted to flow over the site, and horses were ridden back and forth across the grave to trample any remaining trace, leaving no mound, no marker, nothing but empty grassland under the endless Mongolian sky. This deliberate erasure from the landscape makes the search for Genghis Khan's tomb fundamentally different from other archaeological quests. It's not merely buried, it is a place that was intentionally made to cease to exist. The secret is also fiercely protected by cultural and spiritual traditions. For many Mongolians, Genghis Khan is a near-sacred figure, and the idea of disturbing his eternal sleep is not a scholarly pursuit but a profound cultural offense. The potential location, believed to be somewhere near the sacred mountain of Berkhan-Koldun in the Kentai province, is treated with deep reverence and is often off-limits to traditional excavation. This powerful combination of physical camouflage and cultural protection has kept the tomb hidden despite its immense historical significance. Yet, the very technology that allows us to look without touching might finally resolve this centuries-old secret. High-resolution satellite imagery can scan thousands of square miles of remote terrain, identifying subtle anomalies in the vegetation and soil that are invisible from the ground. These spectral signatures can reveal the ghostly outlines of ancient structures or disturbances hidden just beneath the surface. Following these satellite clues, archaeologists can deploy drones equipped with advanced sensing equipment. These drones can fly over culturally sensitive areas, mapping the ground with LiDAR light detection, and ranging, which uses laser pulses to strip away the vegetative layer and create a detailed, three-dimensional map of the microtopography below. This technology could reveal the faint imprint of a long-filled-in river channel or the slightest unnatural variation in the ground, a potential sign of the tomb's engineered concealment. Furthermore, other non-invasive methods like magnetometry could be employed. This technique measures tiny variations in the Earth's magnetic field caused by buried features. The presence of a large burial chamber, especially one that might contain metal artifacts or have been constructed with fired bricks, would create a distinct magnetic anomaly. By correlating data from satellites, drones, and ground-based sensors, researchers could build a compelling case for a specific location without ever breaking the sacred ground. The ultimate goal isn't to excavate, but to finally confirm the legend and allow the site to be protected and honored for what it is, the final resting place of one of history's most formidable figures, whose peace was so carefully guarded for generations. From the sweeping Mongolian plains where a conqueror's tomb was lost to history, we voyage into the depths of the Mediterranean Sea, where a different kind of secret lay hidden for 2,000 years. In the year 1901, sponge divers exploring a Roman-era shipwreck off the coast of the Greek island of Antikythera made a discovery that would utterly confound historians for decades. Among the statues and amphorae, they recovered a heavily corroded lump of bronze and wood, its original form almost completely unrecognizable. It wasn't until decades later, when archaeologists began to carefully clean the object, that they saw it for what it truly was: an intricate clockwork device composed of dozens of interlocking bronze gears, a level of mechanical sophistication that no one believed ancient Greeks had achieved. This artifact, now known as the Antikythera Mechanism, has been called the world's first analog computer, a breathtakingly complex machine that stands as a shocking anomaly in our understanding of ancient technology. For much of the 20th century, the mechanism's true purpose remained a matter of fierce debate because its internal workings were too fragile to take apart. Early X-rays provided tantalizing glimpses of the gear trains, revealing a system of incredible precision with gear teeth cut at precise angles. Inscriptions on the outer casing, once deciphered, spoke of celestial bodies and cycles, suggesting it was an astronomical device. But how did it work? Was it a navigational tool, a planetarium for teaching, or perhaps an intricate calendar used for religious or agricultural purposes? The mechanism forced a complete re-evaluation of the Hellenistic world, suggesting a previously unknown tradition of high engineering that was lost for centuries after the fall of the Greco-Roman civilization. It was a ghost from a forgotten technological age, a puzzle box waiting for the right key. That key has arrived in the form of advanced three-dimensional X-ray technology. Modern techniques like microfocus X-ray computed tomography act as a virtual archaeology tool, allowing researchers to peer inside the corroded layers of the mechanism without ever touching it. This process generates incredibly detailed three-dimensional maps of the internal gear structures, revealing inscriptions and mechanical features that were previously invisible. These high-resolution scans have been instrumental in identifying more of the device's functions, confirming it could track the cycles of the moon, predict solar and lunar eclipses, and even model the irregular orbit of the moon with a brilliant pin and slot mechanism that accounted for its changing speed. But the investigation doesn't stop with seeing inside. The next step is bringing the machine back to life through digital reconstruction. By using the data from the tomography scans, computer modelers can create a perfect animated simulation of the entire mechanism. They can then virtually turn the input crank and watch how every single gear interacts, confirming theories about its calculations and potentially discovering new functions that were not immediately apparent from the static fragments. This digital resurrection allows historians to test the mechanism's accuracy against known astronomical events from its time, providing a powerful verification of its purpose. Furthermore, comparative analysis with other ancient artifacts is now becoming a crucial tool. As more inscriptions are fully revealed by the scans, scholars can search for parallels in other known Greek astronomical texts, such as the works of Archimedes or Hipparchus, potentially linking the device's design to a specific school of thought or even a known inventor. This isn't just about understanding a single machine. It's about rediscovering an entire lineage of lost scientific knowledge, giving us a profound new appreciation for the intellectual ambition of the ancient world. Stepping away from the intricate clockwork of the ancient Greeks, we find ourselves gazing up at a monument so immense and so precisely built that it has fueled speculation and wonder for millennia. The Great Pyramid of Giza, constructed for the pharaoh Khufu around 2500 BC, is a marvel of engineering that seems to defy its own time. How did a society without iron tools, pulleys, or the wheel move over 2 million stone blocks, some weighing more than 60 tons, and assemble them with a precision that rivals modern architecture? The debate over its construction is one of history's oldest, pitting mainstream archaeology against a colorful array of alternative theories, from long, winding ramps to extraterrestrial architects. This isn't just a question of how it was done, but a test of our understanding of human ingenuity itself. The conventional and most widely accepted theory involves a massive, straight ramp built directly against the side of the growing pyramid, up which workers would drag the stone blocks on sledges. However, the mathematics of this approach quickly becomes problematic. For a ramp to reach the top of the 480-foot structure at a manageable gradient, it would have required more building material than the pyramid itself, an enormous volume of bricks and earth that would then need to be cleared away, leaving little archaeological evidence behind. Other theories propose a spiraling ramp that corkscrewed around the exterior of the pyramid or a system of internal ramps, a concept that offers an elegant solution but still lacks definitive proof. On the far fringes, some point to the pyramid's astronomical alignments and mathematical precision as evidence of lost advanced technology or even alien intervention, arguments that often say more about our modern underestimation of ancient capabilities than they do about the past. Modern technology is now providing the tools to move beyond speculation and test these theories with empirical evidence. The first line of inquiry starts not at the pyramid but at its source. Advanced geological analysis of the stones can pinpoint their exact origin quarries. By matching the chemical and mineralogical fingerprint of each block to a specific quarry, researchers can map the supply chain, understanding the logistical challenge the builders faced. At the Giza Plateau itself, LiDAR scanning is being used to create a hyper-detailed three-dimensional map of the entire site. This technology can detect the faintest topographic anomalies, the ghostly impressions of ancient roads, worker settlements, and most importantly, the remnants of construction ramps that have been buried by sand for 45 centuries. These subsurface clues are invisible to the naked eye but are perfectly clear to laser sensors, allowing archaeologists to search for the physical evidence of ramp systems without a single destructive dig. Perhaps the most fascinating application of technology is in the field of experimental archaeology, where researchers are using period-accurate tools and materials to test construction methods in real time. Teams have successfully demonstrated that wetting the sand in front of a wooden sledge reduces friction by up to 50%, effectively cutting the number of workers needed to drag a massive block in half. This simple, brilliant technique is even depicted in an ancient Egyptian tomb painting. Furthermore, by using copper chisels, dolerite pounding stones, and wooden levers, skilled artisans have shown that it is entirely possible to quarry and shape limestone and granite with the tools available at the time. These experiments provide a crucial reality check, proving that what seems impossible to us was entirely within the reach of the ancient Egyptians' practical knowledge and collective manpower. The mystery of the pyramids is not a puzzle of missing technology, but one of organization, will, and a profound understanding of the physical world that we are only now beginning to fully appreciate. Leaving behind the sun-baked deserts of Egypt, we now turn to a mystery forged not from stone, but from golden gemstones and sunlight, a treasure whose vanishing is as brilliant and baffling as its creation. Often called the eighth wonder of the world, the Amber Room was a breathtaking Baroque chamber, a masterpiece of 18th century craft. Originally installed in the Charlottenburg Palace in Prussia, it was later presented as a diplomatic gift to Peter the Great of Russia and painstakingly expanded in the Catherine Palace near St. Petersburg. The room's walls were adorned with over 6 tons of meticulously carved amber panels, backed with gold leaf and inlaid with flawless mirrors and precious Florentine mosaics. To stand within it was to be immersed in a warm, shimmering glow, a literal gilded cage of light and artistry that was, without question, one of the most valuable objects on Earth. And then it was gone. The room's fate is inextricably linked to the darkness of the Second World War. As Nazi forces advanced on Leningrad in 1941, curators at the Catherine Palace made a desperate attempt to save the Amber Room. They tried to dismantle it, but the panels, centuries old and fragile, began to crumble. Fearing total destruction, they made the heartbreaking decision to leave it in place, attempting to conceal it behind ordinary wallpaper. The ruse failed. The Wehrmacht's army group north discovered the treasure, dismantled it in a matter of 36 hours under the supervision of 2 expert curators, and shipped the countless crates to Königsberg Castle in East Prussia, now Kaliningrad, Russia. There it was partially reassembled and put on display. But as the war turned and the Allied bombing of Königsberg intensified in 1944, the room was once again crated up for safekeeping. After the city fell to the Red Army in April 1945, the Amber Room was never seen again. It simply vanished into the fog of war, becoming the world's most magnificent missing persons case. Theories about its final moments are as numerous as they are dramatic. The most straightforward explanation is that it was destroyed in the fierce artillery shelling and fires that consumed Königsberg Castle in the final days of the war, its priceless amber panels melting into a tragically beautiful but unrecognizable puddle of resin and ash. Other theories suggest it was successfully evacuated and loaded onto a ship such as the Wilhelm Gustloff, which was tragically sunk by a Soviet submarine in the Baltic Sea, taking its secret cargo to a watery grave. The most tantalizing possibility is that it was hidden. Local folklore is rich with stories of the crates being secreted away in the final, chaotic hours, lowered into deep, flooded mines in Saxony, walled up in the cellars of the ruined castle itself, or buried in a hastily dug pit in the surrounding countryside. For decades, treasure hunters have scoured maps and dug holes across Poland, Germany, and Russia, chasing whispers and shadows. This is where modern technology steps in, offering methods to sift through rumor and focus on fact. The first crucial tool is the slow but steady process of declassification. As intelligence archives from the KGB, Stasi, and Allied forces gradually open to historians, previously unseen documents, interrogation transcripts, and soldier diaries are coming to light. These papers can provide critical clues: a logistics officer's note about a special train's destination, a guard's recollection of crates being moved to a specific bunker, or an internal memo dismissing a particular location. This archival detective work can dramatically narrow the vast geographic search area. On the ground, non-invasive sensing technologies can then take over. Ground-penetrating radar can scan the earth beneath Königsberg Castle's ruins or around suspected mines, looking for the distinctive shapes of buried crates or the architectural anomalies of a sealed chamber. Magnetometers can detect metal reinforcements or nails used in the crating, while infrared thermography can identify subtle temperature differences on walls, potentially revealing hidden voids where the panels might be concealed. Perhaps the most innovative approach lies not in finding the room itself, but in finding its pieces, the algorithms that power international art databases and track stolen artifacts are now sophisticated enough to tackle this cold case. High-resolution images of the Amber Room's mosaics and intricate carvings can be fed into these systems. They then constantly scan global auction house listings, private dealer catalogs, and even social media, searching for a match. The idea isn't that the entire room would appear on the market. It's that a single fragment, perhaps sold off clandestinely by a soldier decades ago and passed down as an heirloom, could surface. The identification of even one small, verified piece would not only prove the room survived the fire, but would also provide a priceless forensic trail, potentially leading investigators back to the original looters or their descendants, and finally to the rest of the greatest treasure ever lost. Moving from the tangible loss of the Amber Room, we now confront a mystery made not of gold or stone, but of vellum and ink, a puzzle that has defied understanding for over 5 centuries. The Voynich Manuscript is arguably the world's most famous unread book. This enigmatic codex, dated to the early 15th century, is a bizarre and beautiful artifact. Its 240 pages are filled with flowing, unknown text written in an alphabet that matches no known language, accompanied by illustrations that are both intricate and utterly confounding. We see delicate drawings of plants that exist nowhere in the natural world, women bathing in a strange green liquid flowing through elaborate plumbing, astrological charts with unfamiliar constellations, and biological diagrams of systems that are decidedly non-human. Since its rediscovery in 1912 by bookseller Wilfred Voynich, it has been a siren's call to the world's top cryptographers, linguists, and historians, all of whom have failed to unlock its secrets. Is it an elaborate hoax, a lost language, a cipher for a known tongue, or the recipe book of an alchemist's wildest dreams? The manuscript gives up nothing but more questions. The history of attempts to decode it reads like a who's who of 20th century intelligence. Teams of codebreakers fresh from their triumphs cracking German and Japanese ciphers during World War II turned their collective genius to the Voynich, confident they could solve it quickly. They failed. The text possesses statistical properties found in natural language, suggesting it is meaningful communication and not random gibberish, yet its structure defies all known linguistic patterns. Over the years, proposed solutions have piled up. Some theorists argued it was a coded version of Latin or a rare Ukrainian dialect. Others suggested it was a constructed language or the work of a lone, brilliant madman. The hoax theory, most famously attributed to 16th century mystic Edward Kelly, posits that the manuscript was created to defraud a wealthy patron like Rudolph II of Bohemia, who was known to have a keen interest in the occult. Yet, the incredible consistency and complexity of the text across its entire length make a deliberate fraud seem less likely. Sustaining such a complex, meaningless script over 240 pages would be a monumental task in itself. This is where artificial intelligence enters the arena, offering a new kind of brain to tackle this old problem. AI language models are not constrained by human linguistic biases. They can analyze the entire manuscript at once, processing every character and word to find statistical patterns and relationships that are too subtle for the human eye to detect. In 2018, a team of researchers from the University of Alberta applied AI techniques typically used in natural language processing. Their model, after being trained on hundreds of different languages, suggested the text most closely resembled encoded Hebrew. It even proposed a specific alphabetic cipher and began automatically translating the first line, yielding a seemingly plausible sentence about a farmer, light, and air. While this initial result is far from a full decipherment, it provides a powerful new hypothesis for human scholars to test, a potential roadmap where before there was only a dense forest of unknown characters. AI can tirelessly test thousands of cryptographic rules against the text, searching for the one key that might finally turn nonsense into narrative. Beyond the text itself, technology can interrogate the very physicality of the book. High-resolution multispectral imaging is a game-changer for fragile historical documents. By photographing each page using light from beyond the visible spectrum, infrared, ultraviolet, and others, researchers can see beneath the surface. This process can reveal earlier drafts, erased text, or underdrawings that were painted over. A faint pencil sketch beneath a final ink drawing could show an artist correcting their work or changing their mind, offering a crucial glimpse into the creative process. If such palimpsests are found, they could provide a Rosetta Stone moment, showing an early version of a page in a known language that was later encoded, or revealing a hidden instruction from the author. Furthermore, precise carbon dating of the vellum and analysis of the ink's chemical composition has already definitively placed the book in the early 1400s, ruling out later hoaxers like Kelly. This scientific verification anchors the manuscript firmly in its time, allowing historians to better understand the intellectual and cultural milieu that could have produced such a unique object. The ultimate breakthrough may come from a combination of these techniques: Imagine an AI model trained not just on the text but also on the images. By cross-referencing the bizarre botanical drawings with a global database of every known plant species from the 15th century, an AI could potentially identify stylized versions of real herbs or suggest the hallucinogenic properties that might have inspired such fantastical flora. The strange astronomical sections could be compared to known star charts from the period, perhaps identifying a specific celestial event like a comet or supernova that was recorded uniquely by this author. The key to the Voynich Manuscript may not be a single linguistic trick, but a complex tapestry of code, illustration, and cultural context that only a suite of modern technologies can untangle. We may never know if it holds profound alchemical secrets, the ravings of a genius, or something entirely unexpected, but for the first time in 600 years, we have the tools to ask the right questions. Of all the legends passed down through history, few have captured the human imagination quite like the story of Atlantis. This sunken civilization, first described by the Greek philosopher Plato around 360 BC, represents the ultimate lost world, a beacon of advanced culture and power that was punished by the gods and swallowed by the sea in a single day and night of catastrophe. In his dialogues Timaeus and Critias, Plato describes Atlantis as a powerful naval empire located beyond the Pillars of Hercules, what we now call the Strait of Gibraltar. He wrote of a concentric island city with magnificent palaces, temples, and canals, rich in rare metals and inhabited by a noble people who eventually became corrupt and arrogant. As divine punishment, the island was shattered by earthquakes and floods, vanishing beneath the waves. For over 2 millennia, this story has been debated. Was it a moral fable invented by Plato to warn against hubris, or was it a distorted memory of a real historical catastrophe? The search for a real Atlantis has taken explorers and researchers to every corner of the globe, with proposed locations reflecting both geological evidence and boundless imagination. One of the most compelling candidates is the volcanic Greek island of Santorini. Around 1600 BC, a cataclysmic eruption, one of the largest in human history, devastated the Minoan civilization on the island, then known as Thera. The eruption triggered massive tsunamis that would have ravaged coastal cities across the Mediterranean, including those on Crete, and caused the center of the island to collapse into the sea, forming the massive caldera we see today. The parallels are striking, an advanced civilization brought to a sudden, violent end by a geological disaster. Other theories point to the Azores archipelago in the mid-Atlantic, suggesting these islands could be the mountain peaks of the sunken continent. Some look even further afield to the marshes of southern Spain, the coast of Cyprus, or even the Caribbean, each theory interpreting Plato's clues through a different geographical and cultural lens. This is where the search moves from myth to science, employing technologies that can systematically scan the ocean floor for evidence. The first and most powerful tool is multi-beam sonar mapping. Modern research vessels can tow arrays of sonar transducers that send out sound waves in a wide fan pattern, precisely measuring the time it takes for the echoes to return from the seafloor. This process creates incredibly detailed, three-dimensional bathymetric maps, revealing features as small as a single shipwreck or as large as an underwater mountain range. By systematically mapping areas like the Atlantic abyssal plain around the Azores or the Mediterranean basin near Santorini, scientists can search for unnatural geometric patterns, straight lines, right angles, or circular formations that stand out from the natural geology and could indicate the presence of walls, foundations, or canals. But what if millennia of sediment and marine growth have completely buried any potential structures? For that, we turn to sub-bottom profilers. This technology is a form of sonar that uses lower frequency sound waves which can penetrate the seafloor itself. Instead of just mapping the surface, it creates a vertical cross-section, revealing layers of sediment, buried river channels, and even potential archaeological features hidden dozens of feet below. A sub-bottom profiler scanning the mud flats off the coast of Spain, for instance, could detect the ghostly outline of a buried concentric ring, matching Plato's description of Atlantis's capital city. Beyond looking for buildings, science can also search for the cataclysm itself. Geologists can use coring devices to extract long, cylindrical samples of sediment from the ocean floor. These cores act like a timeline, with each layer representing a different era. By analyzing these layers, scientists can look for a specific, widespread ash layer from the Santorini eruption or evidence of a massive tsunami, a distinct layer of chaotic land debris and shells dumped far out to sea by a giant wave. If such an event layer is found and accurately dated to coincide with the collapse of a known coastal civilization, it would provide powerful circumstantial evidence that this was the disaster that inspired the legend of Atlantis. Finally, satellite-based remote sensing offers a macro view of the oceans. Satellites equipped with radar altimeters can measure the minute variations in the height of the sea surface. Because water gravitates slightly toward massive structures on the seafloor, these satellites can actually detect the presence of submerged mountains, volcanoes, and even potential archaeological sites through the subtle bumps and dips they create on the ocean surface. This technology has already been used to discover unknown underwater volcanoes. Could it one day pinpoint the ruins of a sunken city? The search for Atlantis is no longer a quest for a single magic bullet, but a multidisciplinary effort combining sonar, geology, and satellite data to separate geological fact from a 2,000-year-old philosophical fiction. We may never find a city called Atlantis, but in trying, we are almost certain to uncover other incredible secrets lost beneath the waves. While the legend of a sunken continent captures our imagination, our next mystery centers on the final days of a man who very nearly conquered the continent of Europe himself. The death of Napoleon Bonaparte on the remote island of St. Helena in 1821 was officially the end of a once-in-a-generation emperor. The British doctors who attended him listed stomach cancer as the cause, a verdict seemingly supported by his family's history with the disease. For over a century, this was the accepted narrative. But whispers of foul play began almost immediately, suggesting that the great general had not been felled by illness, but by a far more sinister and deliberate end. Was Napoleon's death a tragic but natural conclusion to a life of immense stress and ambition? Or was it the cold-blooded murder of a political prisoner, orchestrated to ensure he could never again threaten the established powers of Europe? The poisoning theory, most famously argued by Swedish dentist Sten Forschaffvad in the 1960s, hinges on one key piece of evidence: Napoleon's hair. Over the years, numerous locks cut from the emperor's head during his exile and after his death have been subjected to forensic analysis. The results consistently show alarmingly high levels of arsenic, a classic poison of the era. These aren't just slightly elevated readings. In some tests, the levels were dozens of times higher than what is considered normal. Proponents of the murder theory point to this as undeniable proof. They argue that someone in his inner circle, perhaps his embittered companion Count Charles de Montholon, who stood to inherit a substantial sum, was slowly dosing him with arsenic over a long period, gradually weakening him until his body finally gave out. The symptoms Napoleon described in his diaries, severe abdominal pain, weakness, and alternating sweating and chills, are also consistent with chronic arsenic poisoning. However, the story is far from simple, and this is where modern science is essential for untangling fact from conspiracy. A high arsenic reading in a hair sample from the 19th century is not, on its own, a smoking gun. Arsenic was astonishingly common in everyday life 200 years ago. It was a key ingredient in everything from medicines and cosmetics to pigments used in wallpaper and dyes for clothing. The green pigment Scheele's green, which was wildly popular at the time, is a copper-arsenic compound that can release toxic vapors in damp conditions. St. Helena, situated in the humid South Atlantic, was certainly damp. It is entirely plausible that Napoleon was being slowly poisoned not by an assassin's hand, but by his own environment. The walls of his residence, Longwood House, were reportedly covered in arsenic-laden green wallpaper. His body could have been absorbing the toxin continuously from the very air he breathed. To move beyond this compelling but ambiguous evidence, we need a multi-pronged scientific investigation. The first step involves a more sophisticated analysis of the existing hair samples. Instead of just measuring total arsenic content, modern mass spectrometry can determine the specific isotopes of arsenic present. Different sources of arsenic, whether from a natural mineral deposit, a common pigment, or a specific rat poison used at the time, have unique isotopic signatures. If the arsenic in Napoleon's hair matches the signature of the green wallpaper in his room, the environmental theory gains immense credibility. If, however, it matches a less common, purer form of arsenic that would have been used specifically as a poison, the case for deliberate murder becomes much stronger. The next line of inquiry lies not with his hair but with his remains. While Napoleon's body was famously repatriated to France in 1840, it has never been exhumed for a full modern forensic examination. A non-invasive CT scan of his body, still sealed within its multiple coffins, could provide a wealth of information without any desecration. Such a scan could look for the telltale physical signs of both stomach cancer and chronic poisoning. Advanced cancer can leave evidence in the bones, while arsenic is known to be preserved in the keratin of toenails for extremely long periods. Analyzing a microscopic sample could provide a timeline of arsenic exposure during his final months, showing if there were sharp, sudden spikes consistent with administration of a large dose rather than a constant, low-level environmental exposure. Finally, scientists could undertake a comprehensive chemical analysis of the artifacts from his final residence. Fragments of wallpaper, samples of floorboards, pieces of his clothing, and even his dinnerware from Longwood House could be tested using X-ray fluorescence scanners. This would create a detailed map of the toxic environment he lived in, quantifying exactly how much arsenic he was exposed to on a daily basis from his surroundings. By combining this environmental data with the isotopic analysis of his hair and the potential evidence from his remains, modern toxicology could finally deliver a definitive verdict. We could know with a high degree of scientific certainty whether Napoleon Bonaparte was the victim of a cancerous legacy, a tragically toxic home, or a cold, calculated act of murder that successfully erased a towering figure from history. Shifting our gaze from the sunken cities of legend to the sun-scorched plains of Peru, we encounter a mystery etched into the very skin of the earth, a gallery of giants meant for an audience in the sky. The Nazca Lines are one of archaeology's most breathtaking and baffling creations. Spread across nearly 200 square miles of desert plateau, these geoglyphs consist of hundreds of intricate designs, straight lines that run for miles, geometric shapes like trapezoids and triangles, and stunning depictions of animals and plants, including a hummingbird, a spider, a monkey, and a whale. Created by the Nazca people between 500 BC and 500 AD, the lines were made by simply removing the dark, sun-baked top layer of pebbles to reveal the lighter-colored sand beneath. This simple technique created stark, contrasting images, but their sheer scale is what defies comprehension. These figures are so massive that their forms can only be truly appreciated from hundreds of feet in the air, raising the obvious and enduring question: why would a people without the power of flight create art they could never fully see? Theories about their purpose are as vast and varied as the drawings themselves. The most long-standing hypothesis, championed by researcher Maria Reich, is that the lines form a massive astronomical calendar. According to this view, the long, arrow-straight lines point to the horizon where the sun, moon, and certain stars would rise or set on significant dates, marking the changing of seasons and informing agricultural and ceremonial cycles. Others propose a more spiritual function, suggesting the lines were sacred pathways walked during rituals to petition the gods for water, a constant concern in the arid desert. The animal figures might have represented totemic deities or constellations. A more controversial theory even suggests the lines were part of a sophisticated system for managing underground aquifers, with the trapezoids marking the location of water sources and the lines directing people toward them. Without any written records from the Nazca themselves, these interpretations have remained educated guesses, fascinating possibilities without a definitive key to unlock their true meaning. Today, technology is providing that key, allowing us to study the Nazca lines with a precision and perspective that was once impossible. The first and most transformative tool is drone photogrammetry. Archaeologists can now send fleets of drones over the desert, capturing thousands of high-resolution overlapping photographs. Specialized software then stitches these images together to create incredibly detailed three-dimensional maps and models of the entire plateau. This is far more than just making pretty pictures. It allows researchers to see the relationships between different figures and the surrounding landscape in ways never before possible. They can measure the exact depth and width of each line, identify previously unknown faint geoglyphs that are eroding away and invisible from the ground, and even detect the faintest of footpaths leading to and from the figures, potentially revealing how people actually moved through and used this immense ritual space. This immense dataset is then fed into Geographic Information Systems, or GIS, powerful software that can analyze spatial relationships on a grand scale. Researchers can input the exact coordinates of every geoglyph and line. The software can then test the astronomical theory with incredible rigor, calculating the precise azimuths of the lines and comparing them to the positions of celestial bodies over the past 2,000 years. This can either confirm or refute alignments with solstices, equinoxes, or specific stars with a level of mathematical certainty that was unreachable with the naked eye and a theodolite. Beyond the sky, GIS can also analyze the lines in relation to the physical world, mapping their proximity to water sources, ancient settlements, and burial sites to see if there are correlations that support the ritual or hydrological theories. Finally, scientists are turning to the Earth itself to understand the line's preservation and creation. By studying soil erosion patterns using satellite data and ground-penetrating radar, they can determine the exact methods the Nazca people used to construct these marvels and how the climate has affected them over centuries. This isn't just about conservation. Subtle variations in soil composition and compaction can reveal the sequence of construction, showing which figures were made first and how the project expanded over generations. This multi-pronged technological approach, viewing from the air with drones, analyzing spatial data with GIS, and examining the ground with radar, isn't just solving a mystery. It's allowing us to virtually walk alongside the Nazca people, understanding their connection to the cosmos, their environment, and their gods, finally giving a voice to art that has been silently waiting in the desert for 2,000 years. After exploring the vast, silent galleries of the Nazca Desert, our next mystery carries us onto the high seas, into a story of profound silence and sudden absence that has become the very archetype of a ghost ship. In December 1872, the merchant brigantine de Gracia spotted another ship, the Mary Celeste, adrift and aimlessly sailing about 400 miles off the coast of the Azores. Captain David Morehouse, recognizing the vessel of his friend Captain Benjamin Briggs, grew concerned when no one appeared on deck to acknowledge their signals. A boarding party was sent over, and what they discovered would ignite a mystery for the ages. The Mary Celeste was seaworthy, with its sails partially set and a full cargo hold of denatured alcohol still intact. There was a 6-month supply of food and fresh water in the stores, yet the ship was utterly deserted. the lifeboat was missing, and the crew of 10 people, Captain Briggs, his wife, their 2-year-old daughter, and 7 seasoned sailors, had vanished without a trace. The last log entry was from 10 days prior and gave no indication of distress. It was as if they had simply evaporated into the Atlantic air, leaving behind a perfectly sound vessel and all their personal belongings. Theories attempting to explain this mass disappearance have ranged from the plausible to the wildly fantastical over the past century and a half. One of the most popular explanations involves the cargo itself. The ship was carrying over 1,700 barrels of industrial alcohol. If some of the barrels had leaked, fumes could have built up in the hold. A spark, perhaps from metal tools rubbing together or even static electricity, might have caused a terrifying but largely non-destructive explosion, a rush of flame that would have blown the main hatch open without necessarily setting the ship on fire. Believing the vessel was about to explode, a panicked Captain Briggs would have ordered everyone into the lifeboat, tethering it to the ship for safety. If a sudden squall then arose, the rope could have snapped, leaving the crew adrift in a small boat while the perfectly intact Mary Celeste sailed away. Other theories suggest mutiny, though there was no sign of a struggle or a sudden waterspout that terrified the crew into abandoning ship. More imaginative minds have posited attacks by a giant squid or even alien abduction, but these ignore the more compelling environmental and human factors at play. Modern technology offers a multifaceted approach to finally solving this maritime puzzle, starting with the ship itself. While the Mary Celeste was eventually lost off the coast of Haiti in 1885, its wreckage may still hold clues. Advanced Underwater Remote Operated Vehicles, or ROVs, equipped with high-resolution sonar and cameras, could be deployed to locate and survey the broken remains on the seafloor. By creating a detailed photogrammetric model of the wreck site, marine archaeologists could analyze the hull's construction for any evidence of a past, repaired breach or structural weakness that might not have been apparent to the 1872 surveyors. They could also search for the specific configuration of the hold and hatch coamings, allowing for precise computer modeling of how alcohol fumes might have accumulated and what kind of pressure event could have blown the hatch open. This digital modeling could be combined with a revolutionary application of historical climate data. Meteorologists and oceanographers now have access to vast datasets that can recreate historical weather patterns with astonishing accuracy. By inputting the known coordinates and dates of the Mary Celeste's voyage, powerful computers could generate a highly detailed simulation of the specific weather conditions in that patch of the Atlantic during those crucial days. This could confirm or rule out the possibility of a sudden, massive squall or waterspout that could have prompted a rash decision. It could also model sea states to determine the likelihood of the captain's lifeboat surviving if it had indeed become separated from the ship. Perhaps the most crucial analysis would be a modern forensic examination of the few artifacts that remain. While the ship is gone, the single surviving cargo barrel from the Mary Celeste's voyage is housed in a museum. Today, we have tools like gas chromatography, mass spectrometry that can detect the faintest chemical residues trapped in the wood of that barrel over a century later. Finding traces of not just alcohol, but also specific compounds that would be produced by a low-level fermentation or a rapid vaporization event would provide powerful physical evidence for the alcohol fumes theory. Every piece of data, from the ship's design and the historical weather to the chemistry of its cargo, can be fed into a comprehensive risk assessment model, allowing us to finally calculate the most probable sequence of events that led 10 people to make a decision that, from our vantage point, seems so utterly inexplicable. From the silent, enigmatic sea, we now journey to a quiet corner of a museum, where a seemingly unremarkable clay pot suggests a spark of technological genius that seems centuries ahead of its time. Discovered in 1936 just outside Baghdad, this object, along with several others like it, looks at first glance like a simple ancient storage jar. But its construction is anything but ordinary. It consists of a 5-inch tall clay vessel, inside which sits a copper cylinder, hammered and soldered shut at the top with a unique asphalt plug. Suspended within that copper tube is an iron rod, completely isolated from the copper by the asphalt stopper. When the jar is filled with an acidic liquid like vinegar or grape juice, a fascinating thing happens. It becomes a basic electrochemical cell, capable of producing a small but measurable electric current. This simple assembly of common ancient materials has become famously known as the Baghdad Battery, and it poses an electrifying question. Did certain ancient cultures stumble upon the principles of electricity long before Galvani and Volta gave their names to the phenomenon? The central debate among historians and archaeologists is not necessarily about the object's function. It clearly can generate a voltage, but about its intended purpose. Was this a tool for practical application or something more symbolic? The most compelling practical theory is electroplating, the process of depositing a thin layer of a precious metal, like gold or silver, onto a less valuable object, such as a copper statue or ring, is a well-documented art form from the Parthian period to which these jars are dated. The conventional explanation involves using mercury. However, a small electrical current is a far simpler and less toxic method for achieving the same result. A craftsperson could have connected several of these jars together to create a battery pack with enough power to facilitate a rudimentary form of electro-gilding, transforming ordinary jewelry into seemingly priceless treasures. This would represent a breathtakingly advanced understanding of chemistry and electrical principles, a secret technique known perhaps only to a specific guild of artisans. On the other side of the debate, many scholars argue for a more ritualistic or medicinal purpose. The mild shock produced by such a cell, perhaps just 1 or 2 volts, would have been a strange and inexplicable sensation to someone unaware of electricity's nature. This could have been interpreted as a divine or magical force. It's plausible the device was used in religious ceremonies, perhaps held by worshippers to feel a tingling touch from a god, or applied to the body as an early form of electrotherapy to numb pain or treat ailments, a practice not unlike the use of electric fish in other ancient cultures. The asphalt seal itself, a material often associated with ritual purity and the underworld in Mesopotamian beliefs, lends some credence to the idea that this object held a sacred, rather than a purely utilitarian, significance. To move beyond this fascinating speculation, we need to apply 21st century laboratory techniques to these 2,000-year-old artifacts. The most direct experiment would be a meticulous reconstruction using only materials and tools available to the Parthians. Skilled artisans working with period-accurate clay, copper smelting techniques, and iron forging methods could create a perfect replica of the battery. This replica could then be tested with various plausible electrolytes, vinegar, lemon juice, fermented grape must, to measure its actual electrical output over time. Connecting several of these replicas in series, as an ancient artisan might have done, would demonstrate whether they could collectively produce a voltage sufficient for electroplating. This hands-on experimental archaeology could finally provide a definitive answer to the question of capability. Beyond simply making the batteries work, we can use advanced microscopy to look for the ghost of electricity on other artifacts from the same era. If these devices were indeed used for electroplating, then some surviving gilded objects from the region might show a distinct signature of an electrochemical process rather than a mercury-based one. Scanning electron microscopy, or SEM, can analyze the surface of ancient gilded items at a microscopic level, examining the thickness, uniformity, and adhesion of the gold layer. An electroplated layer would have a different crystalline structure and deposition pattern compared to one applied with mercury amalgam or simple leaf gilding. Finding even one object with this telltale signature would be a monumental discovery, providing a tangible link between the mysterious jar and a practical, widespread ancient industry, forever altering our understanding of technological progress in the ancient world. The journey from the intriguing possibility of ancient electrical knowledge brings us to an object shrouded not in mystery of function, but of faith and identity. Our next enigma is perhaps the most personally resonant and spiritually charged artifact in the world, the Shroud of Turin. This 14-foot-long linen cloth, housed in the Cathedral of St. John the Baptist in Turin, Italy, bears the faint, haunting image of a man who appears to have suffered the torturous wounds of crucifixion. From the lacerations on his back to the puncture wounds in his wrist and feet, and even the precise blood flow patterns from a crown of thorns, the image corresponds with chilling accuracy to the biblical account of the Passion of Jesus Christ. For millions of the faithful, it is the burial cloth of their Savior, a sacred relic of immense power. For skeptics, it is a masterful medieval hoax, a clever forgery designed to inspire devotion and pilgrimage. The debate over its authenticity is a centuries-old battle between science and faith, a conflict that modern technology is uniquely positioned to mediate. The central question is one of age. If the shroud can be definitively dated to the 1st century, it becomes a profoundly significant archaeological object, whether one views it as miraculous or not. If it is from the Middle Ages, it becomes a fascinating historical artifact of devotion, but its connection to the historical Jesus is severed. The controversy reached a fever pitch in 1988 when 3 independent laboratories in Oxford, Zurich, and Tucson were granted permission to perform radiocarbon dating on a small sample of the cloth. The results, published to global fanfare, pointed to a date between 1260 and 1390, squarely placing its creation in the medieval period. For many, the case was closed, but almost immediately, critics of the findings raised serious objections. They argued that the sample taken came from a corner of the shroud that was likely a medieval repair, patched with newer threads after a fire damaged the relic in the 1530s. Others suggested that bacterial and fungal contamination on the ancient fibers, or even the carbon monoxide from candle smoke over centuries, could have skewed the isotopic ratios, making the linen appear hundreds of years younger than it truly is. This is precisely where new, non-destructive technologies can step in to either confirm the 1988 findings or completely overturn them. The first and most crucial advancement is in the field of radiocarbon dating itself. Modern techniques, known as accelerator mass spectrometry, require samples hundreds of times smaller than those used in the original test. This means scientists could now take multiple, minuscule samples from various parts of the shroud from the center of the cloth, far from any potential repaired edges, and from areas with different levels of contamination. By comparing the dates from these multiple points, researchers could immediately identify any anomalies. If several samples from pristine areas all consistently yield a 1st century date, while a sample from the edge shows a medieval date, it would strongly support the repair theory and invalidate the original conclusion. This multi-point sampling approach, impossible in the 1980s, is now standard practice and would provide a much more robust and reliable date. Beyond carbon dating, forensic science can interrogate the shroud's very fibers with microscopic precision. Raman spectroscopy and Fourier transform infrared spectroscopy are analytical techniques that use light to identify the molecular composition of a material without touching it. By scanning the shroud's fibers, these instruments could detect the presence of medieval pigments like ochre or vermilion, which would be a clear sign of a painted forgery. Conversely, if the analysis confirms that the image is not composed of any pigment, but is instead a result of a subtle chemical change in the cellulose of the linen itself, a caramelization or oxidation that darkened the threads, it would deepen the mystery of how such a precise, photographic negative image could have been formed by an unknown process centuries before photography was invented. Furthermore, the study of pollen grains and plant microfossils trapped in the weave of the cloth offers a completely different line of evidence. Over decades, researchers have claimed to have identified pollen from plant species that are native only to the region around Jerusalem, some of which are known to have bloomed in the spring, the time of the crucifixion. Critics argue this pollen could have been transferred by later handlers or simply misidentified. Today, DNA sequencing technology can analyze the biological dust trapped within the shroud with unprecedented accuracy. By extracting and sequencing the ancient DNA from these microscopic particles, scientists could not only identify the plant species with certainty, but also potentially detect the genetic traces of the people who handled the cloth throughout its history. Finding a high concentration of Middle Eastern plant DNA deep within the linen's core, coupled with human DNA profiles common to the Levant region 2,000 years ago, would provide powerful circumstantial evidence supporting an ancient Palestinian origin, weaving a biological story that carbon dating alone cannot tell. The ultimate goal is not to prove or disprove a miracle, which by definition lies outside the realm of science, but to finally establish with a high degree of certainty the historical context of the cloth's creation. A coordinated, international effort using the full suite of these non-invasive technologies could provide a consensus that the 1988 study lacked. It could tell us once and for all whether the Shroud of Turin is a devotional object from the time of the Crusades or an archaeological enigma from the time of Christ, an ancient cloth that continues to challenge our understanding of history, science, and the enduring power of belief. Leaving behind the sacred mysteries of ancient relics, we plunge into the modern terror of a serial killer who weaponized not just violence, but intellect, taunting authorities with a series of codes that have, until very recently, remained defiantly unbroken. In the late 1960s and early 70s, the San Francisco Bay Area was paralyzed by fear of a shadowy figure who called himself the Zodiac Killer. His crimes were horrific, but it was his subsequent communication campaign that cemented his infamy. He sent a series of letters to local newspapers filled with brutal details, chilling threats, and most famously, 4 complex ciphers. These coded messages were his trademark, a Chinese letter declaration that he was smarter than the entire police force and public combined. He promised that his ciphers contained his identity, but for over 50 years they yielded nothing but frustration. That is until a pivotal breakthrough in 2020, when a team of private citizens finally cracked one of the 4, known as the Z340 cipher. Their solution, however, was not the name they had hoped for, but a rambling, nihilistic rant about not wanting to go to hell and collecting slaves for the afterlife. This revelation was deeply anticlimactic, yet it proved the ciphers were solvable, reigniting the hunt to decipher the remaining 3, and perhaps finally unmask the man behind the terrifying persona. The decryption of the Z340 cipher was a monumental achievement, but it was achieved through traditional code-breaking methods, immense patience, and a dose of luck. The 3 remaining ciphers, particularly the daunting Z13 and Z32, are considered far more complex and shorter, offering fewer characters for cryptanalysts to find patterns in. This is where the investigation moves from the domain of dedicated amateurs to the cutting edge of computational power. The most promising tool on the horizon is quantum computing. Unlike classical computers, which process information in binary bits of zeros and ones, quantum computers use qubits, which can exist in multiple states simultaneously through a property called superposition. For code breaking, this is a potential revolution. Cryptographic systems, including the complex substitution ciphers the Zodiac likely used, rely on the fact that it would take a classical computer centuries to test every possible key. A sufficiently powerful quantum computer, however, could theoretically perform these calculations in a fraction of the time, running through millions of possible solutions concurrently to almost instantly land on the correct decryption key for the remaining messages. While we await the full maturation of quantum technology, a more immediate and democratic effort is already underway: massive crowd-sourced decryption. Online communities of thousands of hobbyists, mathematicians, and linguists continuously collaborate, testing new theories and algorithms against the unsolved ciphers. They employ sophisticated software that can perform linguistic pattern recognition at a scale impossible for any single individual. These programs analyze the ciphers for frequency analysis, comparing the occurrence of symbols to the known frequency of letters in the English language, but they go far beyond that. They can search for patterns that match known zodiac phrases from his letters, test for homophonic substitutions where multiple symbols represent the same common letter like E or T, and even attempt to identify the killer's possible linguistic tics or misspellings that might be embedded in the code. This global brain trust represents our best current hope, a relentless digital army working around the clock to pry open the zodiac's final secrets. Yet, even if every cipher is solved, the messages may not contain the killer's name as he promised. They could be more rambling, encrypted boasts. Therefore, the technological pursuit must run in parallel with a genetic one. The zodiac letters themselves are not just paper, they are artifacts covered in potential evidence. He licked the stamps and envelopes, and his own skin cells and saliva are undoubtedly preserved within the glue and on the paper fibers, trapped for decades in police evidence storage. Modern forensic techniques can now use a non-destructive method to extract minute DNA samples from these sources. Once a viable profile is obtained, the same investigative genetic genealogy that identified the Golden State Killer could be deployed. By uploading the anonymous DNA profile to public databases, investigators could find distant relatives of the Zodiac Killer. From these genetic matches, skilled genealogists could build out a sprawling family tree, using historical records like census data, birth certificates, and obituaries to narrow the list of suspects down to a single, identifiable individual who lived in the Bay Area during the time of the murders. This would finally attach a name and a face to the haunting shadow, providing closure to the victims' families and solving one of America's most enduring criminal mysteries, not with a confession, but with a single, irrefutable genetic fingerprint. Traveling from the cryptic ciphers of a modern killer, we journey back in time thousands of years to a mystery written not in code, but in granite, standing silently in the French countryside. In the village of Karnak in Brittany, one of the most breathtaking and perplexing archaeological sites in the world awaits. Here, scattered across the landscape, are over 3,000 prehistoric standing stones or menhirs, arranged in seemingly endless parallel rows that stretch for miles. These are the Karnak stones, erected by a Neolithic society over 6,000 years ago, a time before the pyramids of Egypt or Stonehenge. The sheer scale of the site is staggering, representing a monumental effort of organization and labor that is almost incomprehensible. The central enigma is as clear as the stones themselves. Why would a Stone Age culture focused on survival dedicate such immense resources to align these massive rocks with such deliberate and, to our eyes, mysterious precision? Were they a gigantic astronomical calendar, a sacred pathway for religious processions, or a territorial marker for a long-vanished people? Theories attempting to explain the stone's purpose are as numerous as the menhirs themselves, each interpreting the silent granite sentinels through a different lens. The most compelling and long-standing idea is that the alignments functioned as a sophisticated celestial observatory. Some researchers note that the primary axes of the larger stone rows appear to be aligned with the rising and setting points of the sun at the solstices, turning the entire landscape into a massive seasonal calendar that would have been vital for an agricultural society to track planting and harvest times. A more spiritual interpretation suggests the carefully arranged lines created a sacred geography, a processional route for rituals that connected the world of the living with the realm of the ancestors or deities, with the taller, grander stones at the western ends of the lines perhaps serving as focal points for ceremonies. Other, more pragmatic theories posit that the lines could have served as territorial boundaries between different clans or as a physical manifestation of a tribe's power and cohesion, a permanent statement in stone meant to awe both contemporaries and future generations. Modern technology is now providing the tools to move beyond these broad theories and test them with a level of precision that was once impossible. The first and most transformative tool is LiDAR, or light detection and ranging. By mounting laser scanners on aircraft or drones, archaeologists can effectively strip away the dense layers of vegetation and modern development that have grown up around the site over millennia. This technology creates a perfectly detailed digital elevation model of the entire terrain, revealing the true layout and orientation of every single stone, including those that have fallen over and been swallowed by the earth. This comprehensive map allows researchers to analyze the alignments with mathematical rigor, free from the visual obstructions and perspective distortions that have hampered ground-based surveys for centuries. They can measure the exact azimuth of each row and determine if they truly point to specific astronomical events with a statistical certainty that was previously unattainable. This immense spatial dataset can then be fed into specialized astronomical software, the same kind used by modern astronomers and archaeoastronomers studying sites like Stonehenge. By inputting the precise GPS coordinates and alignments of the Karnak rows, this software can run a simulation of the night sky as it would have appeared over Brittany 6,000 years ago. It can calculate whether the gaps between certain stones framed specific stars or if the long axes of the alignments pointed toward the moon's most extreme northern and southern rising points, known as the lunar standstills, which occur on an 18.6-year cycle. This kind of analysis can either confirm or definitively rule out many of the celestial theories, moving the discussion from speculation into the realm of hard scientific evidence. Beyond the stones themselves, technology is probing the surrounding landscape for clues about the people who built them. While the megaliths are the most visible remnant of this culture, they were undoubtedly part of a larger lived-in environment. Using ground-penetrating radar and magnetometry, archaeologists can conduct wide-area surveys of the fields and forests around the alignments. These non-invasive tools can detect the ghostly outlines of buried post holes from wooden structures, the remains of hearths from settlements, and most importantly, the locations of burial mounds or ceremonial enclosures that are associated with the stones. Finding the homes and tombs of the builders would provide an invaluable context, helping us understand if the alignments were the centerpiece of a thriving community or a remote ceremonial site visited only during specific times of the year. Excavation targeted by these surveys could uncover tools, pottery, and organic remains that can be radiocarbon dated, providing a firmer timeline for the construction and use of this awe-inspiring complex. Each scan, each digital model, and each soil sample brings us closer to hearing the story these silent stones have been waiting 6,000 years to tell. From the silent, stoic mystery of the Karnak stones, we now turn to a historical event defined by its terrifying lack of control and a compulsion to move that gripped an entire community. In the sweltering summer of 1518, the city of Strasbourg, then part of the Holy Roman Empire, became the stage for one of history's most baffling and terrifying phenomena. It began in mid-July when a woman named Frau Trophia stepped into the street and began to dance. This was not a dance of joy or celebration. It was a frantic, compulsive, and seemingly involuntary act. She danced for days without music, unable to stop. Within a week, dozens of others had joined her. By the end of the month, the number of afflicted dancers had swelled to over 400, their bodies convulsing and writhing in a desperate, exhausting frenzy for days on end. Historical accounts describe a scene of pure horror with people dancing until their feet bled, bones broke, and many ultimately collapsed and died from heart attacks, strokes, or sheer exhaustion. The city council, desperate for a solution, bizarrely encouraged the dancing, even constructing a stage and hiring musicians, believing the sufferers needed to dance the fever out of their systems, a strategy that, predictably, only made the epidemic worse. For centuries, historians and scientists have grappled with the question of what could have caused such a mass psychogenic illness. The most famous theory involves ergot poisoning. Ergot is a fungus that grows on damp rye, a staple grain in the medieval European diet. This fungus produces alkaloids that are chemically similar to LSD, which can cause powerful hallucinations, spasms, and convulsions. If the Strasbourg population had consumed bread made from ergot-infected rye, it could theoretically explain the involuntary movements and the shared hallucinogenic experience. However, this theory has its detractors, as classic ergotism, also known as St. Anthony's fire, more commonly leads to gangrene and a burning sensation in the extremities, not coordinated, days-long dancing. Other explanations lean heavily on psychology, pointing to mass psychogenic illness or mass hysteria. This phenomenon occurs when extreme psychological stress manifests as physical symptoms in a group of people. The people of Strasbourg were under immense duress at the time. The region was suffering from famine, extreme poverty, and a pervasive fear of disease and death, thanks to a series of devastating harvests and the recent spread of syphilis. In this climate of existential dread, a shared psychological breakdown expressed through physical movement is not entirely out of the question. Modern science offers a multi-pronged approach to finally diagnose this 500-year-old mystery, beginning with the most direct evidence possible, the victims themselves. While identifying and exhuming the specific remains of those who died from the dancing plague is a monumental challenge, it is not impossible. Parish records from the time could potentially point researchers to specific burial plots. If remains can be located, the field of paleotoxicology could provide definitive answers. Using advanced mass spectrometry, scientists could analyze the bones and hair of the victims for traces of ergot alkaloids or other mycotoxins. These compounds can be preserved in the body for centuries, and their presence would be a smoking gun, directly linking the bizarre behavior to a toxicological cause. Finding these chemical signatures would strongly support the ergotism theory, closing a major chapter in this strange story. If toxicology draws a blank, then the investigation would shift to the environment and the collective psychology of the city. Historical climatology is a rapidly advancing field that can reconstruct past weather patterns with remarkable accuracy. By analyzing tree ring data, ice core samples, and records from wine harvests, scientists can build a precise picture of the weather in the Alsace region in the years leading up to 1518. This data could confirm whether the conditions were cold and wet enough to promote the widespread growth of ergot fungus on the rye crops. Conversely, it could show a period of severe drought and heat, which would support the theory of extreme famine-induced stress as the primary trigger. This environmental context is crucial for understanding the pressures the population was under. Finally, we can use the tools of computational social science to model the spread of the behavior itself. Researchers could create sophisticated psychological models that simulate how a combination of extreme societal stress, superstition, and the power of suggestion could lead to a rapid cascade of mass psychogenic illness. By inputting data about the population density, the dissemination of information or misinformation in a 16th century city, and the known timeline of the outbreak, these models could test the viability of the mass hysteria theory. They could show how a single, initial case, whether caused by a neurological condition, genuine poisoning, or a personal psychological break, could have acted as a catalyst, its symptoms becoming a terrifyingly contagious template for the fears and anxieties of an entire community. The answer to the dancing plague may not be a single cause, but a perfect and terrible storm of poison, poverty, and panic that modern technology is now equipped to unravel. Departing from the psychological turmoil of the dancing plague, we now turn to a mystery of a far more tangible nature: the deliberate, calculated concealment of immense wealth. Among the famous Dead Sea Scrolls discovered in the mid-20th century, one stands entirely apart from the rest, while the other scrolls are ancient religious texts written on parchment or papyrus. This one is different. It is the copper scroll, and it is exactly what it sounds like: two rolls of nearly pure copper etched with text. Found in a separate cave at Qumran in 1952, this artifact is not a spiritual treatise but what appears to be a straightforward inventory. It lists 64 locations where staggering quantities of gold, silver, precious aromatics, and priestly vestments were supposedly hidden. The amounts are almost fantastical, describing tons of precious metal, a treasure that would be worth billions today. The scroll's matter-of-fact instructions: in the ruin that is in the valley, dig down 7 cubits, contrast sharply with its incredible claims, creating a compelling puzzle. Is it a genuine treasure map from the 1st century, a record of the temple's wealth hidden before the Roman siege of Jerusalem, or an elaborate work of fiction? For decades, the primary obstacle has been the scroll's own physical state. It was so brittle from oxidation that it could not be unrolled without destroying it, keeping its full message locked away. The initial opening of the scroll in the 1960s was a feat of archaeological engineering, requiring it to be carefully cut into strips. While this allowed scholars to read the text, the translation presented a new set of enigmas. The Hebrew used is a later form than that found in the other Dead Sea Scrolls, and it is filled with Greek words describing the locations and quantities of the treasure. The described hiding spots are infuriatingly vague, referring to landmarks like the Old Washer's House, the Cave of the Pillar, and the Valley of Achor, whose ancient names have been lost to time. This has led to a myriad of theories about the treasure's origins and authenticity. The most widely accepted theory posits that it details the hidden wealth of the Second Temple in Jerusalem, squirreled away by priests or zealots before the city fell to the Romans in 70 AD. Other scholars suggest it represents the collective treasury of the Essene community, thought by many to have inhabited Qumran, while skeptics argue the entire list is legendary or metaphorical, a piece of religious folklore rather than a practical guide. The sheer difficulty of the hunt, combined with the lack of any significant discovery despite numerous attempts, has only deepened the mystery and the allure. This is where 21st century technology can cut through centuries of speculation and failed expeditions. The first and most crucial step is to re-examine the source itself with tools that simply didn't exist when the scroll was first opened. Multispectral imaging is a revolutionary technique for studying ancient documents. By capturing high-resolution photographs of the copper strips using light from across the electromagnetic spectrum, including ultraviolet and infrared, researchers can see the etched letters in a completely new way. This process can dramatically enhance the contrast between the engraved text and the corroded copper background, potentially revealing faded characters, previously unseen punctuation, or even subtle scribble corrections that were invisible to the naked eye. A single clarified word, a better place name, a more specific measurement, could be the key that unlocks the entire list, redirecting the search from a dead end to a promising new location. With a refined translation in hand, the focus then shifts to the rugged landscape of the Judean desert. This is a perfect task for drone-based aerial surveying. Teams can deploy quadcopters and fixed-wing drones equipped with high-resolution cameras and, crucially, LiDAR scanners. These drones can fly over vast, inhospitable areas, such as the many ravines and valleys around the Dead Sea, creating detailed three-dimensional topographic maps. The LiDAR's ability to digitally remove scrub vegetation is invaluable here, revealing the ground surface beneath and identifying any subtle, human-made features. The ruins of an old structure, the entrance to a sealed cave, or the telltale signs of ancient excavation that match the descriptions in the scroll. A drone could cover in a single afternoon an area that would take a ground team weeks to traverse, systematically scanning for the ruin in the valley or the cave of the pillar. Once a potential site is identified from the air, the final tool in the arsenal is ground-penetrating radar. Unlike traditional excavation, which is destructive and often prohibited in archaeologically sensitive areas, GPR allows for a non-invasive peek beneath the soil. Archaeologists can grid off a promising area and methodically sweep it with a radar unit. The device sends electromagnetic pulses into the ground and measures the reflected signals, building a profile of subsurface features. It can detect voids like caves or tunnels, different soil layers indicating past digging, and most importantly, anomalies with the density and shape of buried metal objects. A strong, concentrated signal from a few meters down could indicate a hidden cache of gold and silver, exactly where the copper scroll suggests it should be. The combination of these technologies enhancing the ancient text, surveying the landscape from above, and then probing it from below, represents our first real chance to move from treasure hunting to archaeological discovery, potentially confirming one of history's greatest financial legends and recovering a lost piece of the ancient world's most sacred heritage. While the copper scroll entices with the promise of earthly treasure, our next mystery offers the even more thrilling possibility of a signal from another world. On a quiet August night in 1977, a radio telescope at Ohio State University known as the Big Ear was performing its routine scan of the heavens, listening for any sign of intelligent life beyond our planet. The project was part of the ongoing search for extraterrestrial intelligence, or SETI, a long-shot effort that few expected to yield results, but then something incredible happened. A narrowband radio signal, blazingly intense and precisely at the frequency of the hydrogen line. A wavelength scientists reasoned would be known to any advanced civilization, pierced the silence. It lasted for a full 72 seconds, the exact duration the telescope's fixed dish could observe that particular point in space. When volunteer Jerry Amon reviewed the computer printout the next day, he was so astonished by the data that he simply circled the alphanumeric sequence representing the signal's strength and in the margin wrote one word: "Wow." That single, powerful, and utterly enigmatic burst of energy has become legendary, the closest we have ever come to potentially hearing a cosmic hello, a whisper that has never been heard again. The enduring power of the WOW signal lies in its perfect, almost poetic, conformity to what scientists predicted an artificial interstellar broadcast would look like. It was a narrowband signal, meaning it was focused on one very specific frequency, much like a radio station here on Earth, a characteristic not found in any known natural cosmic phenomenon. Its intensity rose and fell in a perfect curve as it passed through the telescope's field of view, exactly as expected for a point source in space. Most compellingly, it was centered on the 1420 MHz frequency, which is the emission line of neutral hydrogen, the most common element in the universe. The thinking was that any intelligent species would recognize this as a universal landmark, a logical channel on which to transmit a message. Despite decades of effort and countless re-observations of that same patch of sky near the constellation Sagittarius, the signal has remained stubbornly silent. This singular nature fuels the debate. Was it a breathtakingly fortunate interception of a one-time alien transmission, or was it something more mundane, perhaps a reflected human signal from a piece of orbiting space debris that just happened to mimic the perfect profile for an ET broadcast? This is where our modern technological arsenal, far more powerful than the Big Ear telescope, offers a real chance to solve the mystery. The first and most significant advancement is in the sheer listening power of contemporary radio telescopes. Initiatives like the SETI Institute's Allen Telescope Array are a world apart from the single-dish efforts of the past. This dedicated facility, comprised of 42 individual radio dishes, can observe multiple star systems simultaneously 24 hours a day. It can now continuously monitor the exact coordinates of the WOW signal with a sensitivity and resolution that was unimaginable in 1977. This constant vigilance means that if the signal was a repeating broadcast, even an intermittent one, we are now infinitely more likely to catch it a second time, finally providing the confirmation that has eluded us for nearly half a century. Beyond just listening harder, we are now listening smarter with the aid of artificial intelligence. Modern radio telescopes collect torrents of data, a deafening cacophony of cosmic noise and human-made interference from cell phones, satellites, and radar. Sifting through this for a faint needle-in-a-haystack signal is a monumental task. Advanced AI algorithms are now being deployed to do this work in real time. These systems are trained to recognize the unique fingerprint of human interference and filter it out instantly, while simultaneously flagging any signals that possess the hallmarks of a potential extraterrestrial origin, like the narrowband signature of the WOW event. This AI-powered filtration massively increases our chances of detecting a genuine signal without it being drowned out or accidentally dismissed as earthly static. Furthermore, our understanding of the cosmos has expanded dramatically. In the 1970s, we knew of no planets outside our solar system. Today, we have confirmed the existence of over 5,000 exoplanets, many of them orbiting within the habitable zones of their stars. Astronomers can now use this new galactic map to make targeted observations. By focusing the most powerful telescopes on star systems in the vicinity of the WOW signal's origin point that are known to host Earth-like, potentially habitable worlds, we are no longer listening blindly. We are conducting a targeted search of the most promising neighborhoods in our galactic city, concentrating our efforts on the places where life is most likely to have evolved and perhaps decided to announce its presence. The mystery of the WOW signal endures not as a disappointment but as a beacon, guiding our technological evolution and reminding us that the universe is vast, strange, and likely full of voices waiting for us to develop the ears to hear them. While the WOW signal invites us to listen to the vastness of space, our next mystery asks us to consider a sound that is unsettlingly close to home. A persistent auditory phenomenon that has become the background noise to a unique kind of modern anxiety. In the small, artistic community of Taos, New Mexico, a select group of residents report being plagued by a constant, low-frequency humming noise. This isn't a sound everyone can hear, but for those who can, known as hearers, it is a relentless presence. They describe it as a distant diesel engine idling, a low rumble that seems to have no point of origin, permeating their homes and often intensifying at night. This Taos hum, as it has become known, is more than an annoyance. For many, it's a source of chronic sleep deprivation, stress, and a feeling of isolation, as their claims are often met with skepticism from those who cannot perceive the sound they find so inescapable. It exists in that frustrating space between the subjective and the objective, a sensory experience that is undeniably real for some, yet utterly absent for others. The quest to identify the hum source has generated a fascinating spectrum of theories, each pointing to a vastly different underlying cause. On the industrial end of the spectrum, investigators have pointed to potential culprits like high-pressure gas lines, electrical power lines, or even secret military communications systems operating at frequencies just below the threshold of hearing for most people. These could generate vibrations or electromagnetic fields that certain individuals might perceive as sound. A more physiological explanation suggests the hum is a form of tinnitus, a perceived sound with no external source. However, this is complicated by the fact that the hum is geographically concentrated. If it were standard tinnitus, one would expect reports to be randomly distributed, not clustered in specific towns like Taos, as well as other reported hum locations in places like Windsor, Canada, or Bristol, England. This geographic pattern strongly suggests an external trigger, even if the mechanism of perception is internal. The most unsettling theory proposes that the hum is a real, low-frequency acoustic phenomenon, but that only a small segment of the population has the auditory sensitivity to detect it, making them unwilling canaries in a coal mine for a pervasive environmental issue. This is precisely where modern sensing technology and medical research can converge to move from speculation to solution. The first and most critical step is to deploy a sophisticated network of infrasound and low-frequency acoustic monitors throughout the Taos area. Unlike standard microphones, these specialized sensors are designed to accurately detect and record sound waves far below the 20 Hz lower limit of human hearing. By placing these monitors in the homes of hearers and in control locations where the hum is not reported, and synchronizing their data collection over a long period, researchers could perform a crucial correlation analysis. If the sensors consistently detect a low-frequency acoustic event at the exact times hearers report the hum intensifying, it would provide the first irrefutable, objective evidence of a physical sound source. This data could then be used to triangulate the origin point of the sound, potentially leading investigators directly to its cause, whether it's a specific piece of machinery, a geological anomaly, or something else entirely. Simultaneously, a parallel investigation must focus on the hearers themselves. Advanced medical studies using detailed audiometric testing can go far beyond standard hearing tests. Researchers can look for unusual sensitivity in the subject's hearing range, particularly at very low frequencies, but the investigation would also delve into neurology. Using functional MRI scans, scientists could observe the brain activity of hearers and non-hearers when they are exposed to simulated low-frequency tones. The goal would be to see if the brains of those who report the hum process these sounds differently, perhaps showing heightened activity in the auditory cortex or other regions that could explain their unique perception. This could determine if the hum is an external sound being picked up by a sensitive ear, or an internal neurological phenomenon being generated by the brain itself, a fundamental distinction that would completely redirect the search for a cause. Beyond sound and biology, a third avenue of inquiry involves measuring something entirely different: electromagnetic fields. It is well documented that some individuals are sensitive to high levels of EMF, reporting symptoms like headaches and a feeling of unease, sometimes accompanied by a perceived buzzing or humming sound. Using precise electromagnetic field meters, researchers could conduct thorough surveys of the Taos area, creating a detailed map of EMF strength from power lines, transformers, and wireless communication towers. By comparing this map with the locations of hearers, they could identify any hotspots of electromagnetic activity that correlate with hum reports. If a strong correlation is found, a double-blind study could be conducted where hearers are placed in shielded rooms and exposed to varying levels of EMF to see if the perception of the hum can be induced or eliminated under controlled conditions. This multi-pronged technological assault, correlating acoustic data with human experience, scanning the brain, and mapping invisible energy fields, represents our best hope to finally silence the mystery of the Taos hum, providing either answers or relief to those who live with a noise that no one else can hear. For centuries, the story of the Greenland Norse stood as a powerful testament to Viking endurance and expansion, a saga of settlers who carved a life from the edge of the known world. Established by Eric the Red in the late 10th century, these settlements, the eastern and western, thrived for hundreds of years. They built stone churches and manor houses, raised livestock, traded walrus ivory and furs with Europe, and even paid tithes to the Pope. Then, in the 15th century, silence fell. When a ship finally arrived from Iceland in the 1540s, expecting to find a bustling community, they discovered only abandoned farms, empty churches, and graves. The entire population, estimated at several thousand at its peak, had vanished without a single written record to explain why. Their disappearance is not a tale of a single catastrophic event, but a slow, quiet unraveling, a mystery of how a successful European society gradually faded from a rugged landscape it had mastered for generations. Theories about their fate have long centered on two compelling and perhaps intertwined villains: a changing climate and rising conflict. The period known as the Little Ice Age was beginning to grip the North Atlantic, bringing with it longer, harsher winters and shorter growing seasons. This would have made it increasingly difficult to sustain the pastoral farming lifestyle the Norse relied upon, based on cattle and sheep. Sea ice would have encroached, disrupting the vital trade routes to Iceland and Norway that supplied them with iron, timber, and other essentials they couldn't produce locally. At the same time, archaeological evidence suggests their relationship with the Thule people, the ancestors of the modern Inuit, grew increasingly hostile. The Norse, clinging to their European identity, seemingly failed to adopt the successful Arctic survival strategies of the Thule, who thrived hunting seal and whale from kayaks. Did the Norse starve in isolation as their farms failed? Were they wiped out in raids, or did they simply pack up and leave a land that could no longer support them? For decades, these questions have been debated with only fragmentary evidence. Today, we can probe this cold case with tools that read the environment itself like a history book. The first key lies deep within Greenland's ice sheets. Scientists can extract long cores of ice, each layer representing a single year's snowfall, creating a pristine climate record stretching back millennia. By analyzing the isotopes of oxygen and hydrogen locked in these layers, they can reconstruct past temperatures with remarkable precision. But even more telling is the chemistry of the ice itself. Winds deposit tiny sea salt particles onto the ice cap, and the concentration of these particles directly correlates with storminess over the ocean. By counting these microscopic clues year by year, researchers can build a timeline of climatic deterioration, identifying exactly when winters became unbearably long and stormy enough to sever the Norse's maritime lifeline to the outside world. To understand how the Norse responded to this worsening climate, we turn to the bones they left behind. Within the ancient churchyards of the eastern settlement lie the remains of the colonists themselves. Isotopic analysis of their bones and teeth provides a personal diary of their diet. Nitrogen and carbon isotopes can reveal the proportion of terrestrial food like beef and dairy versus marine food like fish and seal. A gradual shift in these isotopic signatures over generations would tell a powerful story of adaptation or failure. If the later Norse bones show a desperate turn to the sea, it indicates they were trying to learn from their Inuit neighbors. If they show no change or even signs of malnutrition and starvation, it paints a picture of a stubborn people unable to adapt their European diet, slowly wasting away as their livestock died. Finally, satellite technology offers a way to find answers without ever setting foot in Greenland. The ruins of Norse farms and structures, long buried under permafrost and vegetation, can be incredibly difficult to locate through traditional surveys. However, these stone foundations retain heat differently than the surrounding soil. Using thermal infrared imaging sensors on satellites, archaeologists can scan large areas of the landscape. These sensors detect subtle temperature differences on the surface, often revealing the clear, geometric outlines of buried walls and buildings that are completely invisible to the naked eye. This technology can help create a complete map of the Norse settlement, showing how it expanded and then contracted over time. Finding outlying farms abandoned earlier than those in the central core would suggest a gradual retreat and consolidation of the population, a slow suffocation rather than a single dramatic end. By combining the climate data from ice cores, the dietary evidence from graves, and the settlement pattern data from space, we can finally write the last, lost chapter of the Greenland Norse, understanding not just that they disappeared, but precisely how their world gradually closed in on them until it vanished entirely. Moving from the silent ruins of Greenland to the sun-drenched island of Crete, we encounter a mystery not of vanishing people, but of enduring symbols, a message pressed into clay that has challenged understanding for over a century. Discovered in 1908 within the ancient Minoan palace of Phaistos, the Phaistos disc is a captivating artifact unlike any other. It's a 6-inch wide baked clay disc dated to the 2nd millennium B.C., and its face is covered on both sides with a spiraling sequence of 241 symbols, stamped into the clay with remarkable precision. These aren't drawn or scratched, they are individual hieroglyphic seals, featuring everything from human figures and ships to birds, flowers, and abstract shapes, creating what appears to be the world's first example of movable type printing, an innovation that wouldn't appear again for over 3,000 years. This singular object exists in a vacuum. No other artifact like it has ever been found, and its unique script, often called Cretan hieroglyphs, remains completely undeciphered, a lonely and brilliant puzzle from the heart of Europe's first advanced civilization. The fundamental questions surrounding the disc are as profound as they are basic. What does it say, and why was it made? The spiral arrangement suggests a text meant to be read from the outside edge toward the center, or vice versa, but without a bilingual Rosetta Stone to provide a key, every attempt at translation has been speculative. Some researchers, noting symbols like a helmeted head and a shield, propose it is a military hymn or a record of a significant battle. Others, seeing figures that might be dancers and a bee-like insect, argue it is a religious text, perhaps a hymn to a mother goddess or a set of instructions for a sacred ritual. A more pragmatic theory suggests it could be a legal document, a list of goods for trade, or even a form of ancient board game. The very method of its creation adds to the enigma. The fact that each symbol was made with a separate punch implies a level of administrative sophistication and a desire for standardized, repeatable communication that we simply don't see elsewhere in the Minoan world. Was this a royal decree, a one-off artistic experiment, or an imported object from a still unknown culture? For over 100 years, the disc has offered no answers, its symbols standing as silent and stubborn as when they were first uncovered. This is precisely where a multi-pronged technological assault can break the deadlock, beginning with a microscopic examination of the disc's very fabric. The first and most crucial step is to employ high-resolution three-dimensional scanning. Using structured light scanners or photogrammetry, researchers can create a digital model of the disc with an accuracy down to the micron level. This isn't about making a pretty picture, it's about forensics. This ultra-detailed model allows experts to analyze the individual tool marks left by each unique punch. They can measure the depth and angle of each impression, study the minute cracks and compressions in the clay, and even identify potential wear on the stamps themselves. This data could reveal the exact number of distinct punches used, the order in which they were applied, and even the handedness of the scribe. If certain symbols, despite looking identical to the naked eye, show subtle variations in their tool marks, it could indicate they were made with different stamps, a clue that might help identify syllables or grammatical rules. This physical analysis of the manufacturing process provides a completely new dataset that purely linguistic approaches have never had access to. This physical data can then be combined with the power of comparative linguistics, aided by our growing understanding of other Minoan scripts. While the Phaistos disc script is unique, the Minoans used other writing systems, primarily Linear A, which also remains largely undeciphered. However, we have a much larger corpus of linear texts to study. Advanced computational analysis can now search for statistical patterns common to both scripts. An AI can be trained to recognize the frequency and positioning of certain signs in the known linear tablets. It can then apply this knowledge to the sequence of symbols on the Phaistos disc, searching for similar patterns, repeating sign groups that might be common words or sign pairs that always appear together. The AI isn't trying to assign meaning directly, but to identify the underlying structural rules of the language, the syntactic skeleton that might be shared between the two scripts. Finding a common pattern would be a monumental breakthrough, suggesting that the disk's language is a variant of the same tongue recorded in Linear A, giving linguists a known, albeit still mysterious, foundation to build upon. Finally, the most promising avenue may be the application of artificial intelligence for pure pattern recognition and decipherment. Modern AI models, particularly deep learning neural networks, excel at finding complex, non-obvious patterns in massive datasets. Researchers can feed the entire sequence of 241 symbols into such a network. The AI can then run millions of simulations, testing the sequence against the known grammatical structures of every recorded ancient language, from Hittite and Luwian to Archaic Greek. It can search for cryptographic patterns, testing for acrostics, syllabic divisions, or even logographic principles where a symbol represents an entire word. The most exciting potential lies in using the AI to conduct a brute force comparative analysis against every known written language from the Mediterranean and Near Eastern Bronze Age. By calculating the statistical probability of the disk's symbol sequence matching the structural patterns of these known languages, the AI could potentially identify its closest relative, providing the first real clue to the linguistic family it belongs to. This wouldn't provide an instant translation, but it would give experts a specific, evidence-based direction for their efforts, moving the disk from a complete isolate to a potentially solvable cryptographic challenge, finally giving voice to a message that has been waiting to be heard for 3,500 years. Of all the modern mysteries we've explored, few have captured the public's imagination quite like the legend of the Bermuda Triangle, a vast stretch of the Atlantic Ocean bounded by Miami, Bermuda, and Puerto Rico that has become synonymous with the unexplained vanishing of ships and planes. The mythos really took hold in the 20th century, fueled by sensationalized accounts of high-profile incidents like the disappearance of Flight 19 in 1945, a squadron of 5 U.S. Navy Avenger bombers that vanished during a training mission, and the subsequent loss of a Martin Mariner seaplane sent to search for them. These stories, often embellished with tales of compasses spinning wildly and calm radio transmissions cutting out abruptly, created a powerful narrative of a supernatural zone where the normal rules of physics and navigation simply don't apply, a place where vessels and aircraft are swallowed whole by some mysterious, unseen force. The reality, however, is far more grounded and reveals a powerful lesson about how storytelling can often overshadow statistical fact. When you actually analyze the comprehensive data from organizations like Lloyd's of London and the U.S. Coast Guard, the Bermuda Triangle shows no greater incidence of disappearances than any other similarly trafficked stretch of ocean. This is one of the busiest shipping lanes in the world, with a constant stream of pleasure craft, cargo ships, and air traffic passing through every single day. The simple law of averages means that with so much volume, some accidents are inevitable, and their concentration in a defined area makes for a compelling, if misleading, pattern. Furthermore, the environmental conditions in this region are uniquely treacherous. The area is prone to sudden and violent microburst storms that can develop and dissipate too quickly for standard weather reporting, catching mariners and aviators completely by surprise. It also sits atop the deep Puerto Rico Trench, meaning a vessel that does founder can sink in waters thousands of feet deep, leaving behind little to no wreckage for investigators to find, a vacuum of evidence that naturally fuels speculation and mystery. So if the supernatural isn't to blame, what rational explanations could account for the more perplexing incidents that gave rise to the legend? This is where targeted scientific inquiry can replace myth with understanding. One of the most compelling natural theories involves the massive reservoirs of methane hydrates essentially, frozen natural gas known to exist on the seafloor in this region. The hypothesis suggests that tectonic shifts or underwater landslides could cause these hydrates to destabilize, transforming suddenly from a solid state into a colossal bubble of gas that erupts toward the surface. The physics here is devastatingly simple. As this immense plume of gas rises, it drastically reduces the density of the water. A ship floating atop such a plume would lose its buoyancy instantly and could plunge to the depths in a matter of seconds, far too quickly to send a distress signal. For aircraft flying low overhead, the erupting methane could enter the engines, causing them to stall, or even more dangerously, the gas could alter the atmosphere's density enough to disrupt the aerodynamics of the wings, leading to a catastrophic loss of lift. We no longer have to simply theorize about such phenomena. We now have the technology to monitor them in real time. A coordinated oceanographic study could deploy a network of autonomous underwater gliders and sensor-laden buoys throughout the triangle area. These instruments could continuously measure water density, methane saturation, and seismic activity, creating a detailed, real-time map of the seafloor's activity. If a ship were to disappear under strange circumstances, researchers could immediately consult this sensor data to see if a hydrate release event coincided with the time and location of the incident, providing a potential and perfectly natural cause. Above the waves, the mystery is being eroded by the sheer weight of data itself. In our modern era of global positioning systems and automated identification system transponders, every commercial vessel and aircraft is constantly broadcasting its location, speed, and heading. By analyzing this vast historical dataset of traffic through the Bermuda Triangle, data scientists can identify patterns and anomalies with incredible precision. They can correlate disappearances with specific weather events, current patterns, or even human factors like common navigational errors in a complex region, systematically debunking the idea of a singular, mysterious force and replacing it with a nuanced understanding of multiple, intersecting risks. The demystification of the Bermuda Triangle isn't about dismissing the tragedies that have occurred there. It's about honoring them with the truth, showing that the real forces at work, the power of the sea, the violence of the weather, and the fragility of human technology are compelling enough without needing to invent a myth. The mystery of the man in the iron mask stands as one of history's most evocative puzzles, a tale of absolute secrecy enforced by the full power of the French state. First imprisoned in the 1680s, this unknown man was held in various fortresses, most famously the Bastille, until his death in 1703. His entire identity was erased by a singular, bizarre order. His face was to be perpetually concealed by a mask, which historical accounts later romanticized as iron but was likely made of black velvet. The most intriguing aspect of his story is not just the mask itself, but the paradoxical treatment he received. He was held in strict, solitary isolation. No one was permitted to see his face or speak to him. Yet he was also treated with a degree of respect, provided with fine food and clothing, and was reportedly well educated and dignified. This combination of extreme secrecy and relative comfort has fueled speculation for centuries, suggesting that his identity was so dangerous, so potentially explosive to the monarchy of Louis XIV, that he had to be made to disappear while being kept alive and comfortable. The list of suspects is a fascinating who's who of 17th century French intrigue, each theory more compelling than the last. The most popular candidate has long been the king's own twin brother, a hidden sibling whose existence would have threatened Louis XIV's sole claim to the throne. Other plausible suspects include General Vivien de Bouillon, who was disgraced for cowardice in battle, the illegitimate son of a previous queen, or even the true biological father of Louis XIV himself. There is also the theory that the prisoner was merely a high-ranking valet who possessed a devastating secret about a royal affair. The sheer variety of these candidates speaks to the power of the mystery. Each theory attempts to solve the riddle of why a man would be treated with such contradictory measures, both hidden away like a dangerous criminal and cared for like a person of immense unspoken importance. Modern science offers several paths to finally unmasking this enigmatic figure, beginning with the most direct evidence possible, his physical remains. The prisoner was buried in the cemetery of St. Paul's Parish in Paris under a false name. While the exact location of the grave has been lost to time, historical records narrow down the general area. Ground-penetrating radar could be used to survey the site, searching for coffins that date to the correct period. If a skeleton is found that can be plausibly linked to the time of his death, the next step would be a full forensic analysis. Isotopic analysis of the teeth could reveal the region where he spent his childhood, potentially confirming or ruling out an aristocratic upbringing in France. Most importantly, DNA could be extracted from the bones. This genetic material could then be compared to existing DNA profiles from the remains of known French royalty, including those of Louis XIV, which are held in the Basilica of Saint Denis. A close familial match would provide stunning, almost irrefutable evidence for the royal twin theory, solving the mystery in a single scientific revelation. If his remains cannot be found, another approach lies in the reconstruction of his living appearance from historical documents. The prisoner was under the constant guard of one man, Bénin d'Auvergne de Saint-Mars, who transferred with him from one prison to another. The meticulous administrative records of the French prison system, particularly the correspondence between Saint-Mars and his superiors, likely still exist in national archives. While they were carefully written to avoid naming the prisoner, they contain a wealth of mundane details about his life, health, and needs. A massive, coordinated project to digitize and cross-reference every single document from this period, prison logs, financial accounts for his upkeep, letters between officials, could be analyzed with powerful text mining algorithms. This software could search for hidden patterns, coded phrases, or financial anomalies that point to his true identity. A sudden, unexplained payment to a specific noble family, or a veiled reference in a letter using a known code of the time, could be the crucial clue that has been overlooked for 300 years, allowing us to finally put a name to the man behind the velvet mask. From the legendary secrecy of a French prisoner, we now journey into the damp, chilling silence of the northern European peat bogs, where the earth itself has acted as a perfect preservative for some of history's most haunting and intimate victims. Across Ireland, the United Kingdom, Denmark, Germany, and the Netherlands, the discovery of bog bodies has provided an unnervingly direct window into the Iron Age. These are not skeletons, but fully realized individuals, their skin tanned to dark leather by the bog's acidic, cold, and oxygen-poor environment. Their facial features, hairstyles, and even the lines on their skin are often perfectly preserved, creating a powerful and sometimes disturbing connection across 2,000 years. Their presence, however, is anything but peaceful. The circumstances of their deaths are almost uniformly violent and deliberate, pulling us into a dark debate about the nature of their end. Were these people victims of brutal criminals or willing participants in a profound religious ritual? The condition of these bodies tells a story of final moments that were often horrific. Take the famous Toland man discovered in Denmark in 1950. He lies in a peaceful repose, his features so tranquil he seems to be sleeping. Yet around his neck lies a tightly coiled leather rope, the instrument of his death by hanging. Another Danish bog body, Grobelman, had his throat slit from ear to ear with such force that it nearly decapitated him. Old Croghanman, found in Ireland, was stabbed, decapitated, and cut in half. Some show signs of overkill, multiple injuries inflicted beyond what was necessary to cause death. This extreme violence points towards either immense personal hatred or a ritualistic act designed to please powerful gods. Adding to the mystery is the fact that many of these individuals were in the prime of their health and showed no signs of having done hard manual labor, suggesting a high social status. Their well-trimmed nails and analysis of their last meals, often a special gruel, further suggests they were not common criminals but people of significance, perhaps chosen for a specific, sacred purpose. Modern forensic science is now the key to interrogating these ancient crime scenes, offering insights that go far beyond what the naked eye can see. The first step is a virtual autopsy using high-resolution CT scanning. This non-invasive technology allows pathologists to peer inside the body without causing any damage to the precious remains. They can create a three-dimensional map of every bone fracture, every vertebrae displaced by hanging, and every hidden wound. For instance, scans of Idgirl, a body found in the Netherlands, confirmed that she had scoliosis, a spinal condition that may have marked her as different or special to her community. CT scans can also reveal the contents of the stomach and intestines in incredible detail, providing a direct link to the person's final hours. This leads to the second powerful tool, isotopic analysis of their last meals. By taking microscopic samples from the stomach and gut content, scientists can perform biochemical analysis that is nothing short of miraculous. They can identify the specific types of plants and grains consumed, right down to the variety of barley or the type of heather used to flavor a final meal. More than just a menu, this analysis can pinpoint the time of year the person died based on the seasonal availability of those foods. If multiple bog bodies from a region all shared a last meal of a particular grain harvested in the spring, it creates a compelling pattern of ritualistic sacrifice timed to celestial events or agricultural cycles. Furthermore, stable isotope analysis of the victim's hair and teeth can tell a life story. Isotopes of strontium and oxygen locked in tooth enamel act as a geological fingerprint, revealing where a person grew up. Hair, which grows at a predictable rate, provides a timeline of their travels and diet over the final year of their life. A body found in Denmark with isotopic signatures from a distant land could indicate a traveler, an outsider, or perhaps a traded slave chosen for sacrifice. Finally, modern forensic pathology can re-examine the wounds with a contemporary understanding of violence. Using high-powered microscopes, pathologists can analyze the cut marks on bones to determine the type of weapon used and the angle of attack, differentiating between a clumsy, rage-fueled assault and a precise, ritualized execution performed with a ceremonial dagger. They can also look for tiny traces of evidence trapped in the skin and hair, such as pollen grains from a specific type of flower that may have been part of a ceremonial garland, or fibers from a distinct kind of cloth used to bind them. By combining the virtual autopsy, the biochemical analysis of their final meal, and the microscopic forensic evidence, we are no longer just looking at a corpse. We are assembling a detailed dossier of their last day on Earth. This multifaceted investigation allows us to move beyond the simple question of murder versus sacrifice and begin to understand the complex beliefs of our Iron Age ancestors, for whom the line between brutal violence and sacred duty may have been profoundly different from our own. Deep within the lush river valleys and dense jungles of Costa Rica lies a geological marvel that defies simple explanation. Scattered across the landscape are hundreds of nearly perfect stone spheres known locally as Los Bolas. Ranging from a few centimeters in diameter to massive balls over 2 meters across and weighing up to 16 tons, these spheres are crafted from granodiorite, a hard, igneous rock. Their precision is astounding. Many are so perfectly formed that their curvature deviates by less than a few millimeters. Discovered in the 1930s when the United Fruit Company was clearing land for banana plantations, the spheres were often moved from their original locations, used as curiosities in government buildings and wealthy estates, a practice that unfortunately erased the crucial context needed to understand them. They are the work of the Diquis culture, which flourished from around 800 A.D. until the Spanish conquest, but their true purpose remains one of Central America's most captivating archaeological puzzles. Theories about why these spheres were created with such painstaking effort are as varied as their sizes. Some researchers propose they served an astronomical function, arranged in specific alignments to mark solstices, equinoxes, or other celestial events, effectively turning the landscape into a giant observatory. Others see them as powerful status symbols, their size and perfection directly reflecting the wealth and influence of a chief or clan, with the largest spheres marking the most important villages or burial sites. A more spiritual interpretation suggests they represented celestial bodies like the sun or moon, or were considered vessels of great power, used in sacred rituals to connect with ancestors or deities. There's even a theory that their arrangement could have mapped out territorial boundaries or trade routes between communities. Without written records from the Dikwis people, each theory is compelling, yet each also has its flaws, leaving the true meaning of the spheres shrouded in the jungle mist. Modern technology offers our best chance to piece together this fragmented puzzle, starting from the sky above. The first and most crucial step is to use drone-mounted LiDAR technology to scan the areas where the spheres were first discovered. While many were moved, historical records and old plantation maps can help identify their original find spots. LiDAR's laser pulses can penetrate the thick jungle canopy to create a hyper-detailed, three-dimensional map of the terrain below. By inputting the known original locations of the spheres into this digital model, researchers can look for patterns that are invisible from the ground. The software can calculate precise alignments between sphere positions, testing the astronomical theory by seeing if they point toward the horizon where the sun rose or set on significant dates. It could also reveal if the spheres were arranged in geometric shapes, lines, triangles, or circles that might have held cultural or social significance, providing the first major clue to their intended design. The next line of investigation moves from the arrangement of the spheres to the very rock they are made from. Using portable X-ray fluorescence scanners, archaeologists can conduct non-destructive chemical analysis on the spheres themselves. Every geological source of granodiorite has a unique chemical fingerprint, a specific combination of trace elements like rubidium, strontium, and zirconium. By taking readings from spheres across different sites and comparing them to samples from known local quarries, researchers can map the stone's origins. This would tell a profound story about the Dikwi society. If all the spheres in a particular valley came from a single local quarry, it suggests smaller, independent production. But if the largest, most perfect spheres in a remote village are found to be made of rock from a quarry dozens of kilometers away, it points to a highly organized society capable of managing complex logistics, specialized labor, and the transportation of multi-ton objects through difficult terrain, indicating a centralized power and a shared cultural purpose that united the region. Finally, putting the spheres into a wider cultural context through digital analysis could yield critical insights. Advanced three-dimensional scanning allows for the creation of perfect digital replicas of the spheres. This digital library can then be used for comparative analysis with other artifacts from the Dikwi's culture and their neighbors. Sophisticated software can scan these spheres for consistent patterns in their size, shape, and any surviving artistic markings, searching for a standard unit of measurement or a common artistic convention. Furthermore, this data can be compared with artifacts from other advanced pre-Columbian societies. Were the Dikwis influenced by the Maya to the north? Are there similarities in the concept of sacred geometry or the importance of spherical shapes found in other cultures? By digitally connecting these dots across time and space, we can begin to understand if the spheres were a unique, isolated development or part of a broader cultural tradition, finally granting us a glimpse into the mind of a people who invested generations of labor into creating perfect forms of stone for a purpose we are only now beginning to decipher. Moving from the deliberate craftsmanship of the Dikwi spheres, we now turn to an event of unimaginable and instantaneous force, a mystery written not in stone but in the splintered trunks of millions of trees. On the morning of June 30th, 1908, in a remote region of Siberia near the Podkamennaya Tunguska River, a blinding fireball tore across the sky. Moments later, a cataclysmic explosion ripped through the atmosphere with a force estimated to be over 1,000 times more powerful than the atomic bomb dropped on Hiroshima. The shockwave flattened over 800 square miles of pristine forest, snapping trees like matchsticks and radiating them outward from a central point in a bizarre butterfly wing pattern. The blast was heard over 600 miles away, and the seismic rumbling was registered as far away as England. For weeks afterward, night skies across Europe and Asia glowed with an eerie silvery light, so bright that people could read newspapers outdoors at midnight. Yet, when expeditions finally reached the epicenter decades later, they found no crater, no massive impact site, and no sizable fragments of the object that had caused such incomprehensible devastation. This absence of the usual evidence has transformed the Tunguska event from a simple cosmic accident into one of the greatest whodunits in astronomical history. The leading theory, supported by the vast majority of scientists, is that a stony asteroid or a comet nucleus, roughly 190 feet in diameter, entered Earth's atmosphere at a shallow angle and tremendous speed. The intense heat and pressure of this entry caused the object to explode in a massive airburst several miles above the ground, releasing its immense kinetic energy all at once without the solid body ever striking the surface. This explains the widespread devastation without a corresponding crater. However, the lack of definitive physical proof has allowed more speculative ideas to flourish. Some have proposed it was a chunk of antimatter from deep space annihilating itself upon contact with our atmosphere, or even a miniature black hole passing through the Earth. A more recent and still debated hypothesis suggests it was a massive release of natural gas from within the Earth's crust, though this fails to account for the observed celestial fireball. For over a century, the case has remained tantalizingly open, a detective story with a missing weapon and no body. This is where 21st century planetary defense technology can be applied to this 100-year-old crime scene, starting with a deep examination of the very soil. While no large fragments have been found, the airburst would have vaporized the object and scattered a fine dust of microscopic particles across the entire region. These particles, known as cosmic spherules, are the calling cards of extraterrestrial objects. Modern satellite-based hyperspectral imaging can now be deployed to scan the Tunguska region. These satellites don't just take pictures, they analyze the light reflected from the Earth's surface across hundreds of different wavelengths, creating a detailed chemical map. They can detect the unique spectral signatures of minerals that are common in asteroids but rare on Earth, pinpointing the exact locations where the highest concentrations of this cosmic dust settled. Guided by this mineralogical map, ground teams can then collect soil samples for laboratory analysis using sophisticated tools like neutron activation analysis and mass spectrometry, which can identify the exact elemental and isotopic composition of the particles. This forensic analysis could finally settle the comet versus asteroid debate. A high abundance of nickel and iridium would point to a rocky asteroid, while a signature rich in volatile elements might indicate an icy comet nucleus. Beyond the chemistry of the object itself, we can turn to the silent witnesses that recorded the event, the trees. The forest that regrew after the blast is a living archive. By taking core samples from the oldest surviving trees at the blast periphery and from those that sprouted immediately after, scientists can perform a detailed dendrochronological study. The tree rings tell a vivid story. The rings from 1908 show evidence of a dramatic growth suppression, likely from the trauma of the blast and the forest fire that followed. More importantly, the chemical composition of that specific ring can be analyzed. Using laser ablation techniques that can sample minute sections of a single ring, researchers can look for a spike in elements like platinum or carbon-14, which are often associated with extraterrestrial impact. This would provide an independent geochemical timeline, corroborating the story written in the scarred landscape. Finally, we can use the power of computational modeling to literally recreate the event in a supercomputer. By inputting all the known data, the pattern of the flattened trees, the eyewitness accounts of the fireball's trajectory, and the seismic records, physicists can run sophisticated airburst simulations. These models can test thousands of different variables: the object's size, density, composition, speed, and angle of entry. The simulation that produces a shockwave pattern that perfectly matches the unique butterfly-shaped devastation zone seen in Tunguska would reveal the most probable identity of the impactor. This isn't just about solving an old mystery, it's about saving the future. By precisely understanding the mechanics and effects of the Tunguska airburst, we can better predict the potential damage from similar-sized objects on a trajectory toward Earth today, allowing for more accurate threat assessments and potentially saving millions of lives from the next celestial visitor. Legend tells of a collection so vast and precious it was said to rival the legendary Library of Alexandria itself, a treasure trove of knowledge lost not to fire, but to the paranoid secrecy of one of Russia's most feared rulers. Tsar Ivan IV, known to history as Ivan the Terrible, was a man of profound contradictions, a ruthless tyrant capable of horrific cruelty, yet also a deeply pious and erudite scholar who was obsessed with amassing ancient wisdom. According to persistent accounts from diplomats and chroniclers, he came into possession of a magnificent library originally belonging to his grandparents, the last Byzantine emperors. This collection, known as the Libreria, was supposedly smuggled out of Constantinople before it fell to the Ottomans in 1453, and was said to contain priceless classical and early Christian texts that were thought to be extinct, lost plays of Aeschylus, the complete histories of Livy, and philosophical works that could reshape our understanding of the ancient world. The story goes that Ivan, fearing its power would be stolen or that its heathen knowledge would corrupt his soul, ordered the entire library to be hidden away in a secret location beneath the Moscow Kremlin, where it was sealed and forgotten after his death in 1584. For centuries, it has been the holy grail for historians and treasure hunters, a specter of what might be the greatest single collection of lost knowledge in human history. Skeptics, of course, have long dismissed the Libreria as a myth, a folk tale born from the grandiose reputation of the Tsar. They point to the lack of any definitive inventory in Ivan's own records and the fact that no text from this fabled collection has ever surfaced on the open market. Yet, the anecdotal evidence is strangely compelling. Multiple foreign emissaries, including a German Lutheran pastor named Johann Wettmann, wrote of seeing the library or hearing detailed descriptions of it from within the royal court. These accounts describe chests and barrels filled with Greek, Latin, and Hebrew codices, their bindings decorated with gold and jewels. The consistency of these reports across different sources lends them a certain credibility. The mystery deepens when we consider Ivan's own character. His obsession with securing his legacy and his fear of betrayal make the act of hiding such a dangerous treasure perfectly in keeping with his psyche. He wouldn't have wanted to destroy knowledge, he would have wanted to possess it completely, to be the sole guardian of secrets that belonged only to him. The library's disappearance feels less like a legend and more like the calculated final act of a profoundly complex and distrustful man. The search has traditionally been a story of fruitless digging and dead ends, with enthusiastic amateurs and state-sponsored teams alike tunneling beneath the Kremlin's cathedrals and armories to no avail. This brute force approach was always doomed to fail, both because of the immense scale of the subterranean world beneath Moscow and the justifiable reluctance of authorities to let anyone dismantle their most cherished historical monuments. But what if we no longer need to dig? This is where non-invasive sensing technology completely changes the game. A coordinated survey using ground-penetrating radar and muon tomography could systematically map the labyrinth of tunnels, chambers, and voids hidden deep beneath the Kremlin's foundations. GPR would be used to identify man-made anomalies, straight walls, sealed archways, or the distinct rectangular signature of a chest or container hidden within the natural soil and rock. Muon tomography, a technique that uses cosmic rays to create three-dimensional images of dense structures, could peer even deeper, revealing the outlines of large, hidden chambers that have been inaccessible for centuries. This would allow archaeologists to create a complete digital twin of the entire subsurface environment, a map that could finally point to a specific, promising location worthy of a careful, minimally invasive excavation. Yet technology can also search in the archives, not just in the earth. If the library was a physical reality, it would have required a massive logistical operation to move and conceal it. There must be a paper trail, a requisition for lumber to build chests, a payment to stonemasons to seal a vault, an order to guards posted on a suddenly off-limits tunnel. These documents wouldn't be labeled secret library, of course. They would be buried in thousands of pages of mundane 16th century administrative records. This is a perfect task for artificial intelligence. An AI model trained to read archaic Russian script and Latin could be set loose on digitized scans of the entire imperial archive from Ivan's reign. It would tirelessly search for patterns and correlations, unusual expenditures clustered around a specific date, the repeated mention of a little-known architect or a particular, otherwise insignificant seller, or even the sudden procurement of large quantities of preservation materials like lime or felt. The AI wouldn't know what it was looking for, but it could flag anomalies in the data that human researchers might overlook, providing a whole new set of clues about where to focus the physical search. And what if we find it? The condition of manuscripts sealed in a damp RUSSIAN Chinese letter for over 4 centuries could be extremely fragile. Here, too, technology offers hope for recovery that would have been pure fantasy just a decade ago. Advanced multispectral and hyperspectral imaging systems can be used on site. These cameras can photograph any recovered parchment or vellum using light from across the electromagnetic spectrum. This process can see through centuries of mold, water damage, and faded ink, revealing text that is completely invisible to the naked eye. For the most damaged fragments, virtual unwrapping software could take over. This astonishing technology uses high-resolution CT scans to create a three-dimensional digital model of a scroll or codex that is too brittle to physically open. The software then algorithmically flattens the virtual pages, layer by layer, allowing scholars to read the text without ever touching the artifact itself. The hunt for the lost library of Ivan the Terrible is no longer a quixotic quest with a shovel. It is a sophisticated, multidisciplinary investigation that combines geophysics, archival data science, and digital restoration. We may not just be searching for a pile of old books, but for the lost voices of antiquity themselves, waiting in the darkness to finally tell their stories. Far from the well-trodden myths of the Atlantic, a similarly foreboding legend haunts the waters of the Pacific. Off the eastern coast of Japan, surrounding the volcanic island of Miyajima, lies a region that has earned the ominous nickname the Devil's Sea or the Dragon's Triangle. For centuries, Japanese fishermen and sailors have told stories of sudden, violent storms, mysterious disappearances, and compasses that spin wildly for no apparent reason. Like its Atlantic counterpart, the Bermuda Triangle, this area has become a canvas for speculation, painted with tales of supernatural forces, sea monsters, and even underwater alien bases. The legend was significantly amplified in the 1950s by author Charles Berlitz, who wove together anecdotal accounts of vanished military vessels and fishing boats to create a compelling, if deeply flawed, narrative of a paranormal danger zone. The parallels between the two triangles are striking, but so are the critical differences that often get glossed over in sensationalist accounts. Both are located in heavily trafficked shipping lanes, which statistically increases the likelihood of accidents. Both are prone to volatile and quickly changing weather patterns. However, the Devil's Sea sits squarely within one of the most geologically active regions on the entire planet, the Pacific Ring of Fire. This is a crucial distinction. While the Bermuda Triangle's mysteries often invoke vague ideas of magnetic anomalies or methane hydrates, the phenomena in the Devil's Sea have a far more obvious and potent culprit: the immense and restless power of the Earth itself. The ocean floor here is a fractured and chaotic landscape of active submarine volcanoes, treacherous seamounts, and powerful hydrothermal vents, all of which can create conditions that are genuinely perilous for any vessel. This volatile geology provides a suite of rational, scientific explanations that render supernatural claims unnecessary. The first and most significant threat is sudden, phreatomagmatic eruption. These occur when magma rising from beneath the seafloor comes into contact with cold seawater, triggering a violent, steam-driven explosion. Such an event can happen with little warning, launching volcanic projectiles into the air, and most dangerously, creating a deadly mixture of water and volcanic gas that is less dense than the surrounding sea. A ship caught above such an eruption could lose its buoyancy instantly and sink without time to send a distress signal. Furthermore, these eruptions can release vast clouds of carbon dioxide and other gases that could displace oxygen at the surface, potentially suffocating an entire crew before they even understood what was happening. Beyond single explosive events, the entire region is a hotbed for ongoing volcanic activity that can be monitored and understood with modern technology. Networks of seafloor seismometers and hydrophones can now detect the constant, low rumbling of magma moving beneath the crust, providing early warnings of potential instability. Sensors that measure changes in water temperature and acidity can pinpoint the location of new hydrothermal vents or gas seeps. By creating a real-time map of this activity, oceanographers can identify zones of heightened risk and advise shipping lanes to avoid them, effectively predicting danger in a way that would have seemed like magic to sailors just a few decades ago. The other primary natural force at work is the powerful and complex system of ocean currents that converge in this region. The Kuroshio Current, also known as the Black Current, is a mighty and warm ocean river similar to the Gulf Stream. It flows northward past the eastern coast of Japan, bringing with it dense fog and notoriously rough, unpredictable seas where it meets cooler waters. This confluence can generate rogue waves, massive, spontaneous walls of water that can appear without warning and are capable of overwhelming even large ships. Modern science is now using sophisticated computer modeling to understand these chaotic events. By inputting vast amounts of historical weather and current data into supercomputers, researchers can simulate ocean conditions with incredible accuracy, identifying the precise combinations of wind, wave, and current that are most likely to spawn these maritime monsters. Finally, a thorough analysis of the historical records themselves often debunks the very mysteries that built the legend. Many of the ships said to have vanished in the Devil's Sea without a trace were actually lost during well-documented typhoons or in the midst of World War II naval battles. The Japanese government, after investigating the claims, even formally dissolved the myth of the Dragon's Triangle as a specific paranormal zone, attributing the losses to the known dangers of bad weather, human error, and the region's challenging navigation. The story of the Devil's Sea is a powerful lesson in how easily we can weave a narrative of the supernatural to explain events that are, upon closer inspection, deeply and powerfully natural. It demonstrates that the real world, with its tectonic violence and oceanic fury, is far more awe-inspiring than any invented myth. Sailing from the calculated risks of the Dragon's Triangle, we dive into a mystery born not from geological fury, but from the whispered tales of sailors and the profound, unexplored darkness of the deep ocean. Throughout the Caribbean, from the Bahamas to the coasts of Puerto Rico and Haiti, fishermen have spoken for generations of a terrifying creature they call the lusca. This is no ordinary giant squid. The legends describe a beast of almost Lovecraftian proportions, a colossal octopus or a bizarre hybrid with the head of a shark and the tentacles of a cephalopod, said to dwell in the deep blue holes that dot the ocean floor. It is blamed for snatching entire fishing nets, creating violent whirlpools on calm seas, and even dragging unfortunate swimmers to a watery grave. For centuries, these accounts were easily dismissed as the superstitious fabrications of men who made their living on an unpredictable and often dangerous sea. But what if these persistent stories are not mere folklore? What if they are the distorted, yet genuine, observations of a real and truly massive animal that science has yet to formally discover? The theory that the lusca could be a real, undocumented species of giant cephalopod is not as far-fetched as it might initially seem. We know that the ocean depths hold astonishing secrets. It was only in the early 2000s that scientists first filmed a live giant squid in its natural habitat, proving that Archaeoteuthis, once a creature of pure legend, was indeed real. More recently, the even larger and more elusive colossal squid has been documented. The Caribbean itself is a perfect environment for such a creature to remain hidden. Its blue holes, underwater sinkholes and cavern systems that plunge thousands of feet deep are some of the least explored places on Earth. These labyrinthine structures offer vast, sheltered spaces and an abundance of prey, providing an ideal lair for a large, reclusive predator. A creature adapted to such an environment would rarely need to venture into the open water where it could be easily observed, emerging only to hunt and explaining the sporadic and terrifying nature of the sightings. This is where modern marine science can transform the search for the lusca from a campfire story into a rigorous scientific inquiry. The first and most powerful tool is environmental DNA sampling, or eDNA. Every living creature constantly sheds microscopic particles of itself, skin cells, mucus, waste into its environment. Scientists can now collect large volumes of seawater from areas of reported lusca activity and run it through fine filters to capture this genetic material. By sequencing all the DNA in the sample and comparing it to massive genomic databases, they can identify every species that has recently passed through that water. If the sequencing reveals DNA that doesn't match any known squid, octopus, or other marine animal, it would be the first compelling, physical evidence that something unknown is indeed lurking in those blue holes. This method is non-invasive and could systematically survey vast areas of ocean, acting as a genetic dragnet for the unknown. To track the movement of something large, we can deploy a fleet of autonomous underwater gliders equipped with advanced passive sonar. These silent, long-duration drones can patrol the depths around blue holes for months at a time, listening for the unique acoustic signature of a very large animal on the move. The powerful jet propulsion of a giant cephalopod, the deep, low-frequency pulses of its movement through the water, and even the sounds of its struggles with large prey would create a distinct sonic profile that sophisticated AI algorithms could learn to recognize and flag amidst the background noise of the ocean. This technology would allow researchers to monitor these environments continuously, building a data set of when and where large biological activity occurs. Finally, to get a definitive visual confirmation, we must go into the abyss itself. Deep-sea submersibles like the Alvin or the newer limiting factor are now capable of reaching the crushing pressures found at the bottom of the Caribbean blue holes. These vessels, equipped with powerful arrays of lights and ultra-high-definition cameras, could be used to conduct systematic surveys of these cave systems. They could deploy bait boxes monitored by silent, low-light cameras to lure out a potential predator, or use remote-operated vehicles to explore the narrow, treacherous tunnels of an underwater cavern network that a manned submersible cannot reach. The goal is no longer to just chase sailors' yarns, but to conduct a comprehensive biological census of one of the last true frontiers on our planet, using technology as our deep-diving eyes and ears. Whether we find the Lusca or simply document the true, albeit normal, giants of the deep that inspired the myth, the voyage will undoubtedly rewrite our understanding of the Caribbean's hidden world. Yet another mystery pulls us from the churning depths of the sea into the hushed halls of museums, where a different kind of legend captured the world's imagination with a glint of polished crystal. For over a century, a series of exquisitely carved, life-sized human skulls fashioned from solid quartz crystal were presented as extraordinary relics of a lost ancient world. The most famous of these, the Mitchell-Hedges skull, was touted as a masterpiece of pre-Columbian artistry, supposedly discovered in a Mayan temple in the 1920s. Its surface was impossibly smooth, its jawbone perfectly articulated, and its overall craftsmanship so precise that proponents claimed it must have been the work of a highly advanced, unknown civilization, perhaps even the mythical Atlanteans. Some believed these skulls held mystical powers or contained encoded information, making them irresistible artifacts that bridged the gap between archaeology and the occult. They represented a tantalizing vision of a past that was far more sophisticated and enigmatic than mainstream history allowed. However, the romantic narrative began to crumble under the weight of scientific scrutiny in the late 20th century. The first major cracks appeared not in the crystal itself but in the paper trail, or rather the lack of one. The field of provenance research, which meticulously traces an artifact's ownership history, delivered a devastating blow. Investigations into the most prominent skulls revealed that not a single one had a documented history that could be traced back before the 1860s. The Mitchell-Hedges skull's own discovery story, a thrilling tale of a teenage girl finding it beneath a collapsed altar in Belize, was debunked by a complete absence of any mention in the original expedition records. Furthermore, art historians noted that the realistic, almost anatomical style of the carvings was completely unlike any known Mesoamerican artistic tradition, which tended to be more stylized and symbolic. The skulls seemed to appear out of nowhere in the European art market during a period of intense fascination with the exotic and the occult, a timing that seemed far too convenient to be mere coincidence. The final, definitive verdict was delivered by the cold, unblinking eye of microscopic analysis. When researchers examined the skulls under high-powered microscopes, they found the telltale marks of modern lapidary tools. The surfaces showed the uniform, parallel scratches of wheels and drills powered by industrial-era machinery, a signature completely absent on verified pre-Columbian artifacts, which were carved using hand-powered tools like bow drills and abrasives like sand and jade dust. These tool marks were the undeniable fingerprints of a 19th-century workshop, not an ancient one. In 2008, a team from the British Museum and the Smithsonian Institution conducted a comprehensive study using electron microscopy and X-ray crystallography. Their analysis confirmed that the skulls in their collections had been carved using modern jewelers' equipment. They also identified minute traces of silicon carbide, an abrasive that was only invented in the 1890s, clinging to the crevices of the carving. The case seemed closed. The crystal skulls were beautiful, intricate, and skillful fakes, products of a bygone era of archaeological forgery designed to feed a hungry market for the mysterious. But what if the story doesn't end there? The possibility remains that somewhere among the dozens of known crystal skulls in museums and private collections worldwide, one genuine artifact might exist. The key to finding it lies in applying a more rigorous and systematic technological screening process to every candidate. The first and most crucial test is advanced spectroscopic analysis. Techniques like Raman spectroscopy can non-invasively probe the molecular structure of the quartz itself. Every geological source of crystal has a unique chemical fingerprint, defined by its specific mix of trace impurities and inclusions. By creating a detailed spectral profile of a skull's material, scientists could compare it to the known signatures of quarries in Mesoamerica that were used by ancient cultures. If a skull's quartz was found to originate from a mine in the hills of Guatemala or Honduras that was active 1,000 years ago, it would be a powerful piece of evidence in its favor, though not conclusive on its own. The next step would be a three-dimensional digital reconstruction of the tool marks. Using a technique called white light interferometry, conservators can create a nanometer scale map of the skull's entire surface. This incredibly detailed topographical map can then be analyzed by sophisticated software that compares the precise shape, depth, and pattern of every single scratch and groove to a vast database of marks left by both ancient and modern tools. The software could search for the distinctive, chaotic cross-hatching of a hand-worked abrasive or the subtle, rhythmic undulations left by a cord-driven bow drill, techniques that would be virtually impossible to perfectly replicate with modern power tools. Finding such a signature on even one skull would immediately separate it from the pack of known fakes and mark it as a prime candidate for further study. Ultimately, the search for a genuine crystal skull is about more than just authenticating a single object. It is a testament to the evolving power of scientific archaeology. These objects, even the fakes, have a fascinating history of their own, reflecting the colonialist fantasies and spiritual longings of the 19th and 20th centuries. Applying our full technological arsenal to them allows us to separate fact from romantic fiction, not to diminish their intrigue, but to understand their true place in history. It demonstrates that the real wonder isn't found in imagined Atlantean secrets, but in our own ever-growing ability to listen to the silent stories that artifacts tell us through the light they reflect, the chemistry they hold, and the infinitesimal marks left by the hands that made them. And so we reach the end of our extraordinary journey through time, a voyage that has taken us from sunken cities and lost tombs to encrypted messages and silent stone sentinels. What unites these 30 mysteries, separated by centuries and continents, is no longer the question of what happened, but the breathtaking reality that we are now equipped to find the answers. We are living in a new golden age of discovery, not because we are digging more holes, but because we have built new eyes, the tools we use to navigate our modern world, the satellite constellations that guide our cars, the genetic sequencers that screen our health, the artificial intelligence that powers our phones, are the very keys now turning in the locks of history's greatest puzzles. This isn't just about solving cold cases, it's about fundamentally rewriting the narrative of humanity. With every application of LiDAR, we peel back the jungle canopy to reveal the ghostly outlines of civilizations we never knew existed, adding entirely new chapters to our story. Each time genetic genealogy identifies a historical figure from a stain on a letter, we move a name from the ledger of speculation into the book of fact, replacing legend with biography. And as artificial intelligence deciphers a once ungovernable ancient script, it does more than translate words. It resurrects a voice, allowing us to hear the thoughts, fears, and triumphs of a people lost to the centuries. These technologies are our time machines, not built with gears and levers, but with code and curiosity, granting us a form of immortality by allowing us to reclaim our past. The thrill of this new era is that the greatest discoveries are undoubtedly still ahead of us. The next headline could announce that a satellite has found the tomb of Genghis Khan, that a DNA test has confirmed the fate of the Roanoke colonists, or that an algorithm has finally decoded the Voynich Manuscript. History is no longer a static subject in a textbook. It is a living, breathing field of inquiry, constantly evolving with each technological breakthrough. This ongoing adventure reminds us that the world is still filled with wonder, that there are still maps with edges waiting to be filled in, and that the human drive to explore and understand is our most powerful inheritance. So keep that sense of wonder alive. The next time you look at the night sky, consider the algorithms sifting through radio waves for a signal like wow. The next time you see a drone buzzing overhead, imagine it mapping a forgotten ruin. History is being solved all around us, and your curiosity is the most important tool of all. If you've enjoyed this expedition to the edges of the known past, make sure to subscribe and hit the bell so you don't miss our next adventure into the unknown. The greatest mysteries are waiting, and together we will be the ones to solve.